extend that and be here tonight. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us this evening. As always, we are going to now begin the public comment. Oh, wait, before we do that, if we could just get a reading of those who are as attendees from the public.
Okay, we have Mia Allen, Michael Sims, Michelle Fay, Middlebury Community TV. We have cafeteria. If there's anybody out there. Nancy Crawford, Sarah Weston, Sharon Fletcher, Susan Ogilvie, Tim O'Leary, Wendy Leeds, Wendy Pratt, William Amadon, and William Danforth. Chris Kramer, Laura McIntosh, Aaron Townsend, Alice Schumerhorn, Barry and Warren King, Brenda Loggy, Dee Bertolf, Emily Listine, Aaron Robinson, George Gross, George Martin, Jane Finney, Jason Mintel, John Wetzel, John Andrews, Julie McGill, Judy Wedger Groves, Kelly Mills, Larry O'Connor, Leanne Lucier, Ruthie Hescock, Lisa Rader, Meow, Michael Sims. I'm not sure where I left off here. Michelle Fay, yeah, okay. So,
Great, thank you. At this,
oh, I didn't just see you right there. I was like, where's the time? I thought you walked in over there.
All good. At this time, we're going to start with public comment. As we had shared in the previous meeting, we are going to limit public comment to 2 minutes. We have a full agenda and there's a lot to get through. We want to be respectful of everyone's time while still providing this important opportunity. I'll give you a warning at 2 minutes. I hope that you respect that. And then I'll give you a warning after the 10 seconds over that and ask you to please stop your public comment. So with that, we'll start off in the room. If there's anyone who wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Yes, sir. And if you could introduce yourself prior to your public comment, that would be great.
My name is Jake Burton. I'm a resident of Cornwall. I'm an alumnus of Middlebury Union High School. I'm a former classmate of some of your children. I have taught some of your children. I've been taught by some of you. That doesn't count for 2 minutes. In my time at the high school, I was also a student of the Patricia Hannaford Career Center. In 2010, I returned to the Career Center to be the engineering, architecture, and computer science teacher. I speak in the past tense because this past July, I resigned from the Career Center. I'm here to tell you in person why that is. In March of this year, the staff were finally asked to provide feedback to the working conditions and the leadership of Superintendent Dana Peterson. That feedback was anonymous. I put my name on the 2 pages of feedback that I delivered, and I never heard one whisper from Dana following that submission. This feedback collectively was also provided to our board, or so we were told. I never heard a response from our board regarding that feedback either. And I say all this because in my 11 years at the Career Center, I offered my time, additional services on leadership team. I served with many of your district employees on grant committees, the Community Partnership Council. This is my community. I'm heavily invested in it. And I can't stomach seeing the Career Center continue to be misled and misguided and the public lied to by the highest employee of the Career Center district. It is really, it's really not great. Last Monday, December 1st, was the Hannaford Career Center board meeting. I said the same thing. I haven't heard from Dana. I haven't heard from any member of that board. The following day, Thursday the 2nd, Dana was in my former program space talking to my substitute, asking that person what their ideas were, but not reaching out to his own staff. So I'm here first to share with you my story about why I resigned, but second to ask you to advise ask you to do your part. You send 2 representatives to the Hanford Career Center.
2-minute warning.
Dana's contract is up this spring. Please advise your representatives to not renew Dana's contract. I'm happy to speak with Candy too. Additionally, oh wait, whatever, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Billy Cox. I live in Ripton, and I want to address the situation between the Ripton School Board and the ACSD Board in terms of the negotiations that are going on. It's my understanding that the instructions from the Vermont State School Board was that there would be negotiations between the 2 boards. And so a negotiation requires 2 participants, not just 1 participant. So I hope that that's changed. If it hasn't changed, I hope that in the near future there will be actual negotiations going on in which both sides are actually negotiating. And then the other thing I want to say is that no matter how displeased this board or the Vermont State School Board may be with the fact that Ripton has left the district, our kids are still entitled to supervisory services, just like every other kid in the state. You cannot, the state cannot withhold supervisory services because of what Ripton has done politically. So I just want to make that clear. It's unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in the room? Yes, ma'am.
I have my comment, and then there's another community member that couldn't attend for scheduling conflicts. They're both brief, so that should be good. So I'd like to express my support for the.
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, sorry, Tanya Spiteri. So I'd like to express my support for the proposed changes laid out by the Burton School Board. The recent ACSD Strategic Plan Advisory Committee refers to prioritizing, making value statements, and being accountable to the community. Having clear, concise, measurable criteria on which we base school closures seems to align nicely with those stated goals. The previous iteration of the ACSD board was presented with a petition signed by over 800 community members asking for changes to the articles to include a town vote on school closure in that town. That petition was not acted upon, but I trust that this board will consider making changes to the articles to align with the wishes of the communities that you serve. If not, would you share with us what you do need to see from the community to consider those changes? And then the other community member, Peter Lynch of Shoreham, his statement is, as has been directed by the State Board of Education, I implore the ACSD Board of Directors to listen carefully to and do everything humanly possible to work with the Burton School Board. Other small towns, certainly Shoreham, are watching very closely to see whether Burton continues to be disenfranchised or not. Burton's unique culture and indeed the unique cultures of all our towns are of great value to ACSD. Closing the Burton School and most other small schools would simply be penny wise and pound foolish. Rural broadband is coming and it will change the lay of the land. The Burton School must remain a viable resource for the Burton community. Peter Lynch, Shoreham. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room?
Ruth Bernstein. First, I ask that you really listen to all of us, whatever your notions might be about what we have to say. And speaking as someone who grew up in rural Addison County, lives here, and is raising my 3 kids here, I have to applaud the Burton School Board that was elected and how well they have spoken for all of us. This is not just about Ripton, though. I hope everyone on the board watched the video of the executive committee meeting. We were one of the first in the state to consolidate, and it was a rush process. I know because I was a part of it. The status quo is not working. We have to do better. Data-driven the proposals from Burton, such as data-driven parameters for school closings, town votes, town advisory committees, and town signatures to get on the school board are all very feasible and good proposals. We're a diverse district and we can improve both our charter and our policy, to reflect, serve, and protect this diversity. A group that has been systemically marginalized in these conversations are rural people, Vermonters, multi-generational and first-generational like myself. And these proposals are a step towards re-engaging us.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Joanna Doria. I live in Ripton. For the record, I just wanted to say I have a public comment prepared, but it was agreed that I could deliver it before you guys begin the discussion on the proposals. So I just want to say that for the record.
Any other comments from the room? Thank you. If you're on Zoom and you wish to make a public comment, if you could raise your Zoom hand. As a reminder, there will be a 2-minute limit. On Zoom, it's a little bit difficult for you to hear me say warning. So we're going to do our best here, but please keep that in mind.
Chris Craig.
Hi, folks. Haven't had a chance to be quite as tuned in the last few months, but I wanted to speak strategically, not just kind of philosophically in favor of Ripton's proposals here tonight. The strategic angle that I want to just bring to the table here for you all to think about is whether there's any pressure on you all to negotiate with Ripton or not. My understanding is that essentially if you choose not to, that the state board has more or less indicated that they would make Ripton their own supervisory union, and then you guys would sort of be scot-free. The wrinkle in that I want to point out is section 261C of the Vermont Education Statutes, which says that the state board may designate any school district, including a unified school district, as a supervisory district if it is large enough to support the planning and administrative functions of a supervisory union. That trumps anything that the state board does. So even if they assign Ripton to be their own supervisory union, that's not the end of the story. Ripton could easily contest that assignment based on the law, and in fact, based on comments from AOE. So for example, at the meeting where this first came up, Secretary Dan French of AOE said, I would agree Ripton is not of the size that we typically would like to see in terms of a supervisory union. I think it would be difficult for them to sustain that. We also have comments from AOE's council saying, although we do not speak for the State Board of Education, because of the potential district's very small size, we are unable to imagine a scenario in which the State Board of Education would declare a Ripton school district to be its own supervisory union under 16 VSA section 1C. So I think if you step back for a minute and think about whether to negotiate with Ripton on this stuff, you ought to be thinking to yourselves whether if you choose not to and Ripton gets hung out to dry, that's going to really be the end of the story. I think there's more to think about there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
How do you get it back to the? Okay, Larry O'Connor. Larry, you're muted.
Hi. Hey, my name is Larry O'Connor. I'm a teacher at the high school. I am also co-president of the local Teachers Association. Good evening, board and community members. Last spring, the staff of the Career Center appealed to the Career Center board to conduct a thorough review of the school's leadership and how it affects climate, morale, and student learning. The association has been working with the Career Center superintendent in various ways for several years to address persistent, ongoing problems with no discernible improvements to conditions. The staff has heard nothing. No plan has been developed by the HCC superintendent or the board to address the dire needs and concerns of the Career Center. Concerns that have been direct impacts on students, teachers, and programming. The last 2 years, they've had teachers leave just prior to the start of the school year. In both of these situations, the faculty leaving blamed the Career Center superintendent. They currently have 2 programs without licensed instructors that are being taught by substitutes. The Addison Central School District are consumers of a product that HCC is offering. We share students. About 25% of the students from ACSD, from the high school, access the Career Center. That's a lot of students. We should be demanding competent leadership. The standard that our community has come to expect from the Career Center cannot be sustained without it. I implore the ACSD board to intervene. I am available to any of you to discuss this in more detail as you need. Thank you. I appreciate you all listening, and have a good night.
Amadon.
Hi, everybody. My name's Will Amadon. I'm a Cornwall resident with 2 kids, one in the school system, one soon to be. I want to thank you all school board members for all of your hard work. It is humbling and it's just so greatly appreciated. So thank you. I wanted to speak briefly tonight in support of Ripton's request to change the ACSD charter. I won't try to speak to specifics, but I want to support it in principle and thematically. I think a poorly written charter has been one of the kind of root causes of a lot of the miscommunication and the acrimony between the school board and the community. In particular, for me, when I voted on consolidation, I didn't read the fine print, and I didn't realize that Cornwall's representative would be elected at large rather than by the town. And for me, that's always been a bit thorny, that small towns essentially are not able to elect their own representatives directly. And I understand that may be illegal by some Vermont statute, but I really support the idea of a nomination process or some other mechanism by which the town, rather than the district at large, can actually choose its representative to the school board. The other thing I really want to support is their ideas about working more with communities. The idea of local advisory groups, to me, that sounds a lot like what we used to have with local school boards. So bringing, more community members in, really bring them together rather than kind of holding them in opposition at times. And I also support, getting more community involvement in changing the configuration of the schools. I think there's a lot of expertise in the community that could be drawn on, for example, rather than relying heavily on outside consultants, but really look to the communities for creative solutions around some of these issues. Thank you again, and have a nice night.
Thank you.
Jason Mattel.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. So thank you. I'm here to talk about the DP program at MUHS. I believe that there will be a presentation that touches on this shortly, and I'm urging the board to take time beyond this presentation to investigate the question as to whether this program is a good fit for our district. I wrote a long email to the board last month, and as I said in that, I've grown skeptical about the program over the past year. I actually was very excited about IB and the DP program for a number of reasons, but seeing how it has been implemented and learning more about its underlying structure has dispelled that enthusiasm. I believe the ACSD board at the time did not understand the true impact and scope of this program upon our school. Briefly, the key points I really want to focus on in a public forum: the IB system at large removes authority from our community and grants control to many decision-making choices to the IB organization in Switzerland. A case that I brought up was that students, seniors who are accepted into the All-State Music Festival will not be able to attend because they have mandatory DP exams. And this emphasis on high-stakes tests and inflexibility is out of our control, unlike in the AP system where there was a lot more flexibility. DP also greatly reduces curricular choice and flexibility. High-achieving students under our old AP system took courses at Middlebury College, at Hannaford Career Center, at UVM, at CCV, online. They could do semesters in programs like the Island School or the Mountain School. None of these options are available to DP candidates. And at larger IB high schools, there are a lot more options, so there is flexibility. But MUHS is small, have choices within DP, and DP is too rigid to take advantage of the choices that are available in our community. Finally, the mental health toll on our students has been severe, and I'm not going to detail this in public, but I encourage you to investigate this by talking with students and the support staff at MUHS about the impact of this program. I hope board members will follow up with me, other parents, and most of all, students to fully understand and assess the DP experience at MUHS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura McIntosh.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Laura McIntosh, and I am a Ripton resident and parent to a middle schooler and a high schooler. I have said before that I see great value in Ripton remaining part of the ACSD, both for the quality of education and the ample opportunities the ACSD provides for our children, but also because most Ripton elementary students go on to join MOMS and MUHS, and being a part of ACSD makes that transition easier both for students and for staff alike. I also believe that Ripton students, Ripton families, Ripton community members, and Ripton taxpayers add great value to ACSD. I am grateful that we're given a second chance to figure out how to work together and come up with solutions that allow us to value each other. I, as a citizen of your district, strongly support the thorough and thoughtful work that the Ripton School Board has done, outlining charter changes that, in my opinion, would enable Ripton and all of ACSD's smaller communities to be valued members of the ACSD instead of citizens without a voice. These charter changes would be more in line with other consolidated districts, but more importantly, would make an equitable voice at the table and a better way to consider the choices we make as a district. If there was ever a time that people needed each other, now is the time. Your own motto is stronger together. Let's keep the together and work as hard as we can to figure out how to move forward together. Please take the time to strongly consider the well thought out and truly workable proposals the Ripton School Board has presented, even if we need to tweak it a little. I see it as having great potential to be a promising start to a mutually beneficial solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Laura McIntosh.
Yes.
So Judy Wishers-Groves.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. I have a couple questions. The first question regards the suggestion at the last board meeting that the wearing of masks affects student learning. I am wondering if any time has been taken on the part of board members or the superintendent to investigate that allegation. I've taken some time and I do not see, except for one surprising post at USC, that the wearing of masks does not impede student learning. In fact, so much of our interaction between people is based on eye contact and what our eyes are saying. And those are not masked by masks. I would also ask, as I did at the last meeting, how many board members and members of the administration took time out of their schedules to actually go in and sub at Mary Hogan, MUMS, or MUHS. In other words, how many of you have gone in and taken over a class and seen and experienced what it's like for a teacher in this district? If you have, you will understand the issues and the problems and so on. If you have not, then you have no basis for the decisions you're making. Lastly, the entire notion of instituting an IB program in order to get Middlebury, Vermont on the map on the East Coast as the only IB district is not worth the experiences that students and teachers and staff are having right now. The focus needs to be, sorry, I think I'm running out of time. I think the focus has to be on student learning, student health, teacher health,
I'm going to ask you to extend
and not on the IB program. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it.
Great. Thank you all very much. I appreciate, continue to appreciate the way in which we go about these debates and conversations. With that, we're going to turn it over to the MUHS school presentation.
Yes. So as was discussed in public comment, we have Justin and Cindy here to share a little bit about MUHS and answer some questions and give us a little bit more of an inside view of what's happening in the Diploma program.
Hi, thanks for having us. Justin Campbell, high school principal, and Cindy Atkins is here as well. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the options that are available to our 11th and 12th grade students. As you're probably aware, coming through the primary years program and then the middle years program, students for the most part are all in the same classes. Beginning of grade 11, there's a number of options available. So we're going to go through those tonight, and then we have a follow-up. It's more exciting than our presentation, which hopefully will be somewhat exciting. We have a video that we're in the process of making. We just need some edits. We'll have a video that we'll share with you as soon as it's done, where we interview some students who are involved in all of these options that we're going to lay out tonight. So you can hear in their own words, you can hear from them directly. So first, career education. So the vast majority of our students who pursue that option attend the Hannaford Career Center. We do have a few that attend the Stafford Career Center in Rutland, and then I think occasionally we have some that also go to Essex. Those are a wide range of courses that are offered focused on career. They are half-day courses that run for 2 years. And there's also some pre-tech programs available for younger students as sort of an exploratory option. So you want to talk about?
Yep, the next one, we wrote it up as the full IB diploma. So One option for students when they enter grades 11 and 12 is to declare themselves a full IB candidate. And we're going to be emailing this to you so you can have this, but I had my teacher hat on and I knew if I handed it to you, you'd be daydreaming or looking at all the list and I want you to try to focus on this. So a full IB candidate, a full diploma candidate, we list here that they would have to take part in 6 subjects and theory of knowledge, the DP theory of knowledge class, which spans their junior and senior year, the last half of their junior year, the first half of their senior year. They also have to take part in an independent extended essay, 4,000 word essay. That starts in their junior year. We do support students with that because we're really lucky to have support here. And then we match students up with a supervisor who's a teacher from that subject area. The extended essays are due in December of their senior year. So our seniors, our current cohort has just handed them in. So everyone is feeling, a big sigh of relief. And then there's creativity, activity, and service, which they have to sort of create this portfolio of 17 different experiences, and it has to be signed off by the diploma or by the CAS coordinator. So that's a quick summary of being a full DP candidate.
A few other options. Students after their sophomore year, so in grades 11 and 12, can participate in dual enrollment. So they can take free of charge up to 2 classes at participating colleges in Vermont. Students along those lines, there's an early college option. So students can enroll full-time in college, usually in their senior year. If they pursue that option, that senior year is where the dual enrollment happens. And so they're also earning credits towards graduation for those, perhaps an English class that they're taking in college. Similar to that, there's the VAST program, Vermont Academy of Science and Technology. It's really similar to early college, but it's specific to the VTC program, Vermont Technical College. So students enroll in VTC in their senior year and earn those outstanding credits towards graduation, and then continue on in VTC the year after having graduated fully from high school. We have work experiences and internships, so students can earn credit towards graduation for holding a steady job and doing and meeting regularly with our school board coordinator as well. We have some students may choose in that situation to have an abbreviated day here. Their academic day might be shortened so they can access those experiences, those work experiences. And some students will take that. I believe we have one right now pursuing a full apprenticeship. So some students, those internships really do blossom into a full apprenticeship in a skilled trade. We have available independent studies. So if there's an area, a class that isn't offered here, we have students regularly who propose a class and really put together an area, an independent study area that's a focus or passion of theirs. And they certainly have to work, in order for that to be realized, they have to work with the teacher here at the high school.
And then we have students don't have to be a full diploma candidate. They may choose to earn certificates. And by earning certificates in select courses, they stay in those courses for the 2 years. They take part in everything that has to happen in those courses with, as far as the IB is concerned, which includes the May testing, and they can earn certificates. And this, I just want to say, last year, our first cohort, we had 24 full diploma candidates, 28, and we had 30 students earn certificates, and some students earned as many as 4 certificates. In our current senior group, we have 24 full diploma candidates, and we have 28 students earning certificates. And again, some of them have picked and chosen, and we have a few students earning as many as 3 or 4 HL certificates, but they, for their reasons, they made a pathway that works for them, and they had reasons of why they didn't want to do the full diploma program. So there's a lot of versatility in that, picking that path.
We also partner with Vermont Adult Learning, so students who are potentially in jeopardy of dropping out or not completing high school can partner with us and Vermont Adult Learning to a couple different options. They could complete their GED, their general equivalency diploma, or they could work with Vermont Adult Learning and the high school to put together a high school completion plan that really works for We have the virtual high school, so in the online age, which has blossomed recently. We have 75 slots a year for students to take classes through the virtual high school. So those are entirely online. I believe we have about 25 students enrolled this semester and another chunk next semester. Those are available. That program predated COVID, but again, in this time, those online options are something that we're all getting a little bit more comfortable with. And then not offered recently during COVID, but pre-COVID, seniors were eligible to take a course at Middlebury College if there was space available. So these are some of the options that our 11th and 12th graders have access to. And many of them, you shouldn't also see this grand list as really separate and apart from each other. Many of those options can be combined. So our school counselors meet regularly with students and their families to talk about all aspects of academic planning, including which of these programs might work for a given student. And from there, our school counselors meet with the administrative team every week. Many things on that agenda, but routinely we're going into sort of more unique or innovative sort of plans for kids. We might have a student where none of the options on the table fit just right, or we need to tweak something. And so that's what that time is. Even the principal and I meet with the whole school counseling team every week. So happy to answer any questions that you have. But those are some of the offerings for our 11th and 12th graders.
Thank you very much. Let's start off. Could you talk a little bit about my vice principal, where I taught, always used to say to me, Mary Jo, it's not about finding the right college. It's about finding the right college for that kid. And so talk to me about the process that a family goes through to identify the best path for them at MUHS. And are there examples or ways in which, if I'm going down this path my junior year, and all of a sudden I feel like it's not the right path, what options does a family have in that regard?
So there's a couple of questions there. I'm not sure. Let me know if I leave anything out.
Great.
And Matt, you got it if I leave anything out as well. So I think number one, it's never too late. Certainly in the junior year, we have lots of students in the junior year and well beyond who have a change of course. I think, though I didn't hear your question directly, the full diploma program does have a 2-year sequence of courses. But within that, if the student even is in the entire diploma program, if they're just enrolled in a DP class, which is ideally a 2-year sequence, they can earn credit for just the first year. And you can choose to do something different the second year, or take a level 1 course in your senior year. I think at least a couple of the students on the video that you'll see did just that, wanted to experience all of the sciences we had. And so I think one of the students took in the senior year a level 1 diploma class.
We have, I'm just sorry to interrupt, but I was really blown away by the video of the interviews, and I can't wait for you to see it, but the students, that was one common thread that they keep reiterating, is that it's important for students to find the path that's right for them, that's the right fit for them, knowing what they would like to do after high school. And so one of the students we interviewed, she is earning a few certificates in DP classes, but she also didn't want to be a full diploma candidate because she wants to experience every science class. And so she's taken every science class now as a senior, at least the first year, and many 2 years. So there's versatility there.
And is that an active conversation? Like, are you sitting down with folks who are saying, wow, I'm really into pick an activity here at this high school, and I want to make sure I have access to that experience, performing arts. If I'm a full DP student, is that going to be a challenge? Like, are those active conversations?
Yes, I would say those conversations typically happen with the school counselors. I'm sure Ms. Atkins is involved as well. But I think school counselors are having those sorts of conversations, not just about the diploma program, not just about college, but with students all the time. And as you can imagine, over that 4-year arc of high school, for any and all sorts of students, there are life circumstances, there are changes in interests and passions, there are sicknesses, pandemic, I mean, all sorts of things change those plans. So I would say it's, I think it's fair to say happy. The plans are really active and our counselors know their kids. Having said all of that, there are times when things are mutually exclusive. If you do this, it precludes you from doing some other option. But again, those sorts of decisions, hopefully, or discussions are very proactive and involve the families and involve the students. Right, not so much the college part, but the academic planning beginning and certainly in that grade.
I do work closely with the counselors as well, and I've attended multiple meetings where the families might request that not only the school counselors there, but I am as well, just to look at all the possibilities, pros and cons, so the student and the family can lead and make the decision that they feel is the best decision for them.
One thing I'll just add that we've been talking a lot about is engaging the community too and understanding the options and being part of that process. And one of the challenges we've had, I think, over the last couple of years, and we're right on the cusp now of figuring out as we come into the new year, we've invited volunteers back already. One of the big disconnects right now is just not having parents present and making connections with teachers and with the school in the way that we normally have physically. And that has been a real challenge, again, over the last couple of years in terms of helping to have this be one kind of cohesive process as opposed to sometimes it feels a little bit like we're crossing Zoom lines in space somewhere. So community is a huge part of this.
And I think just to go back to Mr. Martell's point, student feedback is absolutely critical. And so we met with students last spring. I think for specifically to our diploma program students, but just also much more broad than that, more broadly than that, it's imperative that we survey, we meet with students, we understand how their experience is. That feedback can help us get better as a school with respect to the diploma program and every other aspect of our school. So I love that suggestion, and we will be acting on that.
Other questions? We'll start and go around. Mary Heather? Oh, I'm sorry, Peter.
Thanks. Just very quickly, do you have numbers on the numbers of kids who take advantage of early college or dual enrollment?
I don't, but I can get that.
Thanks.
You mean Kathy can get them.
She won't let me forget that yet. We'll have them tomorrow morning first thing. I do know that certainly dual enrollment has really, I've talked with our school counselors today, and the dual enrollment options of taking those two college classes has grown substantially over the last couple of years.
Is that typically through CCB?
I can find out where it's through. Yes, typically, but not exclusively. And there's a long list of course colleges that colleges do not.
Yeah, just for convenience.
Yeah, exactly.
Mary Heather? I have two quick questions. One is, I know I have a DP candidate student actually right now who's a senior this year. So I know you all have met with the cohort a couple of times, and I'm just curious if you would be able to share with the board some of the student feedback that you have received from this current cohort and what things are being done to address particular concerns that have flared up.
If I had to summarize the feedback so far this year, first of all, in our first meeting, well, it wasn't our first meeting. I met with them during pre-week, then we had another meeting in September. We had, or late September, early October, and then we had a third one. So we've had 3 meetings with. I've had that with each cohort separately, so 6 meetings total. For the current seniors, I was disappointed that at our second meeting when I reminded them, there's just a lot coming at them, and I reminded them because they were starting to say, I think one of the students, he looked at me and he said, it'd be really nice if there was a calendar that showed us when all these internal assessments happen. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, there is on our website. You remember? And they all, I've heard this collective group said, oh, this is great. Like it's all written down for us. So a lot of the times there's information I want to make sure students know, and I feel badly because I feel like I'm delivering. So I'm trying this year also to give them a chance to just tell me how things are going. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes that can become kind of stress comes out in different ways for students, and they are under stress. As full DP candidates, they've got a very full plate, and people handle that differently as far as trying to give feedback. It gets a little negative at times, and I'm trying to figure out how to help them break that down and hopefully not be as stressed. But in that feedback, the IAs, the internal assessments, they feel like they're not distinct. But I had to point out to them that, well, they're broken down and scaffolded, so they actually, even though on the calendar it looks like they're going to happen at different times, because they're broken down and scaffolded, you might be close to finishing one, but now in 2 other classes you're starting to brainstorm your research question. And so you do feel like you have a lot going on because of that process. So that's one thing, they wish that they were more distinct. On the spot, I can't think of other, I mean, I will say they are stressed, and so we try to talk about that. I haven't done as much as I'd like with that, yeah.
I'll just add a couple of things, and I haven't been at those meetings this year. I was at the meetings last spring, and certainly interact with students. And you probably hear this first item from all students, but I think especially from the diploma program students, we hear that distribution of assessments could use work. So end of marking period before vacations, things clump together. And so it's not that I'm always overwhelmed, but there are these periods during the year when the work is overwhelming. So that working to more evenly distribute things over time would be helpful. We've also heard, I think I've heard that the workload is a lot. And so specific to that second part of your question, what are we thinking about doing? We're looking at with our math program, sort of potentially offsetting the course sequence so that in math you could begin an SL diploma program class in grades 10 and 11, which would do a couple of things. If we went down that road, it would give students an early window into what the rigor of those courses is like. It would also, in the senior year, when you have the extended essay due, you have college applications, you have the rigors of that program, you would have finished that math class. And so that could alleviate some of that stress and that most stressful. I think the first semester of the senior year is a pretty intense time for many students for many reasons. So those are the sorts of things that we've heard and things that we might like to respond. But definitely, that's the key question, right? Keep gathering that feedback and keep making sure that as we go through this cycle more times, the experience is better and better for our students.
I'm sorry. Just one brief comment. I can support it roll along, but I do have my questions regarding diploma program and the ability, and talk to Cindy about this too, and having to make a choice between playing football or doing the diploma program. We're in the quote old system, and I don't say change isn't good, but in the old system, that was perfectly possible, okay? But there can be times when you have to make that choice, and you are obviously a person who is in the top 10% academically and otherwise, who then is having to make a life choice relative to whether they want to try to go to a competitive college or they want to play. I'm using football as an example, but that to me is a real problem, and that maybe speaks a little bit to other people's time. That's relative to the rigidity of IB. In the big picture, it's okay, but I think the nitty gritty comes down to being, I think, a question, and I'm not totally there yet.
I think I don't know that we have a perfect answer for that yet. I think the key is with those sorts of questions, we need to ask our students, probably in an anonymous survey, so we're hearing from all of them, and we can really crunch the data and see where we are. I don't disagree that those choices.
Well, I hope you do that, because I really think you're going to have to ask. This is a strenuous program.
Yep.
Perfectly reasonable for a person who wants to undertake it, but not necessarily where they have to eliminate something really important in the rest of their.
But I also want to point out that we do have football players right now who are full diploma candidates. So I know maybe someone has felt like they've had to make that decision. I think every student has to make that decision for themselves. I know in both cohorts, there are athletes who play 2 sports who are full diploma candidates. So I don't want people to think that IB or anyone else is saying you have to make that decision, but I think for some students, it's a reality that they might feel that they need to make that decision because of the time pressures. To be a full diploma candidate, our first cohort that graduated already, the students who earned 3 and 4 certificates are at very good colleges. I don't see a whole lot of difference with the ones that are full diploma candidates. The advantage for the full diploma candidates is we have 2 or 3 students who have been given basically their first year of college handed to them and they're starting as sophomores. The ones that earn certificates, they've been given credit for those courses and they're starting at a higher level. I think students, it's an individual question and they have to find the right fit for them. I think somehow as a culture, we have to get rid of the notion that if we view the full IB diploma as the most rigorous, that means I have to do it. That's when we set ourselves up for difficulty. I think we have to have honest conversations about ourselves. What do we want from our educational experience? What are we looking for? And create that pathway that meets those needs. I think that's what we need to start working on as well.
And can you provide clarification on the point? Because I do think that there's this idea out there that if I don't do the full diploma program, I'm then precluding myself from going to the IBs.
Right. So I did send out a survey to our first cohort, but because they're already off, they're off to college now. So I sent the survey, electronic survey to the parents and asked them to forward to the students. So I have a very terrible return rate. I don't feel there's any value in it. But I do know, by tracking the students, I do know what schools they've gone to. So I could email you a list along with this document here, letting you know, here's where our certificate candidates are going to school.
Well, and there's a myriad of other issues to address there. It's almost how do we get a good understanding from the admissions departments at those elite universities to hear from them and create that relationship to know, are you going to discredit, is this kid not going to be seen the same way if they only have certificates compared to a student who has a full diploma program, while this student might have a different portfolio of evidence of excellence. I think that's something that the public needs to have a clear understanding, that you're not getting dinged because you didn't do the full diploma program here at MUHS.
Right. Well, as a parent, so my son is also in the same cohort, so I know all sorts of sides of this. But we asked that question to a couple of universities. We emailed and said, because he was wondering if he was going to get the full diploma or take some diploma courses and create a different pathway. The response we got from the few schools that we did contact said we wouldn't look at that as if your school offers the full diploma and you didn't take the full diploma, we wouldn't count that against you. What we would look at would be X, Y, and Z, which is you're challenging yourself, you're doing everything you can to develop as a person, you're giving back to your community, all those things that the admissions office looks at. So.
And I think that's an important message for us to do as much as we can to get out there to our kids.
I think also, my kids are little, so I haven't gone through that part of it myself. But I'll watch the tape back. I think also we need to be really clear with our students that the admissions process shouldn't drive their decisions. And that's easy for me to say because my kids are in elementary school. But I guess anecdotally, speaking for myself and watching so many students go through over 20+ year career, I think the students that are able to really demonstrate that they've pursued understanding who they are and a passion, I think those students do amazing things in college. I'm not going to mention what schools they go. If we're honest with ourselves, the IBs, NESCAC schools, I went to an NESCAC school, so I get it. I get the attraction. It's really a lottery now. I mean, there's so many qualified students who've gone to, you pick the metric. They're valedictorians. They've done the IB diploma program or not. They've been multi-sport varsity athletes. I don't know that we can get a firm understanding of what really drives that process on any given year. I think we have to help our students really follow their passions and pick the right course for them and trust that they might apply to a whole host of schools and they're going to get into somewhere that's going to really help them get onto their next best place in life. They're also probably, this is true for any student now, if they apply to a bunch of Ivies and SPAC schools, they're going to get rejected from some, no matter how amazing they are. No one gets into all of them anymore, statistically speaking.
Hi, Mr. Campbell. So I guess I have a couple of questions and also comments as someone who's like doing the IB program myself and who also went through the middle years program, which I think we're like just getting to that part of implementing it where like I've been in that for most of middle school and high school. And well, first of all, I just want to address some of the community comments I've heard and stuff about the IB program concerning flexibility and stuff. Personally, in at least my experience, the middle years program especially was incredibly flexible. I took an extra English class and an independent study in my sophomore year. Technically, by the end of this year, I have enough credits to graduate. I also think that like within the IB diploma program, so many of my friends have also been like, no, I'm not doing the full diploma program because I want to do X, Y, and Z, or I want to take these courses and that's just not going to work for me. Or personally, I don't think I'm a good fit for the program. And I think that's something that's like really nice to see in other students because like there are so many great students who just aren't doing the DP program because they don't want to. One, I guess, suggestion or question I have is like, I know a lot of us, especially last year, struggled with like specifically picking classes because it was all, first of all, it was online, so it was kind of difficult, and we had to meet with counselors online and kind of take whoever's guidance we could get. So sometimes talking to whichever like junior we could grab and be like, hey, what do you think of this class really quickly? And so I think I would be interested in seeing maybe more guidance in that decision because I think it's really important and I think I probably could have used some advice. And also I was asking on like what you were considering to incorporate like more student voice into how you manage the IB diploma.
I think your first suggestion ties to what Dr. Burrows was saying. I think this year compared to last, and hopefully future years compared to this year, the more direct conversations we can have, the better. With you, with your school counselor, with groups of students, and potentially members of the school council department, Ms. Atkins. I think the more we can get those routines up and running again, the better. In terms of gathering feedback, I think it's important to do a number of things. I think an anonymous survey instrument, we've gone through many of the topics tonight. Distributed to everyone is helpful, to all students, not just diploma students, but if we ask some demographic questions at the beginning, we can sort by particular groups of students. And I think also, sort of focus groups, for lack of a better term, bring together a group of 5, 6, 7 students to talk with Ms. Atkins and Ms. Demon and I about how the diploma program went, whatever the topics are. I think in those small group settings, you can really add some detail and color to topics that, you might get some data on a survey, but you really want to, have someone who's lived it, have a group of people who lived it and really understand more deeply. So I think those are the two methods that I think relative to other topics I've sought information about what students have worked really well in small groups and then survey.
It has been unfortunate that we've had to do so much online. It does make it you just can't have the same quality of a conversation. I think we all know that. And it's unfortunate. And I'm hoping we're headed in a direction where we can be sitting down in a room and having a discussion. Yeah.
Victoria. This is more a comment, I guess, but I remember when we discussed early on when we were all introducing ourselves to IB, and we discussed DP, and at the time I remember it being described as, I think it was by a IB representative who said, really for a school our size,
you might see 15 kids go for the DP program, that it's not meant to be, something that everybody does. And I think you two have described well today that really our offerings are a buffet. And to follow up on what Chip had asked, I have a sophomore, and we were talking about sort of his math trajectory. And I called Sarah Soul, who's our guidance secondary, what do we call her? Post-secondary. Thank you. Guidance, and she said of the 165 schools that she's spoken to this year alone, she said the one single thing that they all said in common is that their approach to looking at applicants is looking holistically. She said, I've heard that word over and over and over and over again. And she said, and so I have to think that they really are speaking the truth, and that it's not, that DP is not the end all be all. It's just another offering in the buffet. And as Peter said, if as a candidate or an applicant, you can show why you didn't choose to do IB because you wanted to focus on theater or football or your job at wherever, that makes you not only a more holistic person, but a good applicant. And I think that has become I think probably as a parent, I'm better versed in IB than the average parent because I sit on this board. And I feel like there's a misconception that IB equates to the diploma program, and that's kind of the end all be all. And somehow we need to manage our communication or our description to really express that it's a buffet of academics or experiences, and that including the Hannaford Career Center, and that there's just a whole spectrum of things that kids can do, and all of them are going to make these kids great citizens of the world, and without judgment. So I guess it was more of a question, a comment.
Other question, Lindsay? Thank you for taking the time to come in and tell us about what's happening at the high school. I have a fourth grader, so I also am, it's not even on my radar yet. I had a couple of questions. Some of the answers might be contained in what you plan to email us. I'm wondering about when do students start to learn about what's offered, this buffet of choices in middle school, in 9th grade, the benefits and the sacrifices and all the options and all the different courses, and how long do I have to get ready for this? Can I 5th grade? So that's one, and it's a real question, but it seems like a big thing. How early do you begin the guidance process for this?
So that's something that I do want to change soon. Typically, the last 3 years, what we've done for the the current 10th graders in January, I would have an evening informational session where parents and the students come in, and I try to break it down because you do start to see everyone sort of glass over, wait a minute, I was just thinking I wanted this and not the whole DP, but I want them to be aware of the information. So I did a presentation in January to the current 10th grade. I'm feeling now, that's a piece of feedback we have heard from students, is we need to start sooner and meet with the 9th grade families. But in middle school, certainly, even though the school counselors might be talking to students and giving out some information of here's what you want to think about, we are not going into the middle school and presenting.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think preparing early might make it less overwhelming. Like 4th grader, I'm already wondering what's going to happen in 6th grade, and I've been trying to look at the website just to, start to do that. And I hear a lot about IB. I'm really glad to know about the other options that are available. And I'm wondering about transfer students and special education students. If somebody were to transfer as in the middle of the 11th grade, and then I think it's kind of different, but students in receiving specialized education services, do they have access to all of these programs with support, or are they? Is that cohort put on a different track?
So no, it's open access. I have to, when I register, so I've already registered all the current seniors for all of their exams that are gonna happen in May. They have up to 2, if it wasn't a COVID year, they might have as many as 3 exams for each subject. Got that taken care of. And I also have requested accommodations for students, and IB is very flexible with those accommodations. But I do need to show, I do need to share a plan or a doctor's note, and they've been always very accommodating. I say always, I'm just in my 2nd year of doing this part of it. But from what I've read, they continue, and I hear from other DP coordinators, they are very accommodating. But that's something I need to do in early November, so that's done already.
And transfer students, the process would flow just like it would whether or not we were an IB school. Our school counselor would sit down with the transfer student whenever they come in, look at the courses they've completed, look at their transcript, essentially look what they've completed, and work with them and with the student and their family to figure out the right courses to take here. And many of these options would likely be brought to bear.
We have had students transfer in as seniors from neighboring school districts, and they might decide, I know I can think of one student who said, I'm going to take year 2 biology. I said, great, you want to earn a certificate? They wanted to know what I meant by that. I explained it, and they signed it, and they said, yeah, I'll do that. So it's possible to transfer in even as a senior and jump into a year 2 course because you've already had year 1 at a sending school and go ahead and earn a certificate.
And I have a 4th grader too, so we'll walk through that.
Yeah, it's a support group or something. My final question, and I don't think you probably have it. One of the criticisms I constantly, when I hear about criticism about IB, is the cost of IB. Where do you find that? We have X number of students participating in the program, and then we have the trickle-down effect of how it enriches the experience of all the students. So it would be hard to quantify it, what's the cost per student exactly, but where does one find, what is the actual cost to be a part of the IB program? Well, everyone, but like, if, say, Mount Aid wanted to be an IB, how much would it cost them to invest in the program? What are the annual dues? How does it compare to other similar frameworks?
So each program has an annual dues fee that I don't take care of. That's from the central office. And then the students that test, that is something I do pay for out of my budget, the DP coordinator budget, are the assessment fees. And just like APs used to be, I'm going to date myself here. I know they used to be around $60 for an AP test. I'm sure they're much more now. Each of the IB tests are around $100. So for a full DP candidate, but we used to, that's also for the student that it's the right fit. It is an opportunity, but like you said, we've got certificate candidates. We also have the DP curriculum and the trickle-down effect of the enrichment of that. So it's tough to quantify, but those are the numbers I know.
And I think it gets that question. I've heard that question as well.
Yeah,
and it's not a dodge, but it's some amount of my time as principal is spent on IB related things, but I wouldn't even know how to quantify that because many of those things I did 2 years ago when I worked in a non-IB school. In my previous school 2 years ago, it wasn't an IB school, and we had curriculum coordinators. they weren't called IB coordinators. They weren't the diploma program coordinator. So I wouldn't know, is Cindy's role purely IB related? That's hard in name and in title and in her daily work, yes. But you need people working on your curriculum regardless. As a relative newcomer to IB, I think the greatest strength that I've experienced so far, this is my third school district. I've worked roughly a decade in two previous. And I really loved being in each of those places. They were very different from each other and different from here. But I think one of the tasks that I watched my colleagues struggle with the most is trying to put together a cohesive curriculum framework. So trying to start and think about, I always use the example of fractions. I don't know why that comes to my mind as a math teacher or something, but trying to think about how do we introduce fractions in elementary school and trace that thread all the way through elementary school, middle school, high school, right through calculus. So that you have students have a deep understanding of fractions and how that plays out in calculus or wherever their upper math course is. That work, to work across schools and right from elementary school teachers to your calculus teacher, and to try to come up with that curriculum framework is something that I've seen good and talented groups of people struggle with and really never get right in places that I've been really proud to work. And I think that advantage of IB, of having many thousands of people put their minds to creating that cohesive framework. So there's certainly local work that's happening too, but you also have access to those resources. That is tremendously powerful. And I don't know how to put a cost on that. The time that I bang my head against the wall in another district, trying to really get that right. Because as soon as you get fractions right, there's an infinite number of other things that you have to do the same work with. And it just feels impossible while also doing your day job.
Yeah, that would be something I would encourage you as a school board to push back on a little bit when you hear someone just make a blanket negative statement about, oh, it's IB. I don't understand what people mean by that, because all this work at the 3 levels, it's about building a cohesive curriculum. Students, the methodology, what's happening in the classroom is very similar to what we used to be doing. There might be some different little tweaks here and there, but it's just best practices. So when you hear someone say, "Oh, it's IB," we've got to dig deeper and find out what are they talking about, because just saying, "Oh, it's IB," you don't know, and I just worry we throw that negative ball, that blanket statement out there, and people think, "Oh, well, IB must be terrible because someone's just saying, oh, it's IB." They got to dig deeper. Barb?
I feel badly for the length of time they're standing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the idea of the survey is awesome, and I think it would be awesome to also include questions that kids are in these dual programs as well, so you get really a big picture, not just the DP program, but also the certificate, even maybe understanding kids' perception of it's important to do, I have to do DP, right? I think that would a really well-defined survey, I think would be really tremendous, and even helping to dispel, some of the thoughts, and also finding areas where, oh geez, here's an area that we really need to focus on misunderstanding amongst, the kids.
Yeah.
And the students. So I could ask more, but I'm going to just leave it at that.
Jen?
A little feel good last one. How are you all doing? How is the staff doing? How are the students? How can the community sort of, I'm a parent of a 9th grader. It's kind of, it's like Dr. Burton was saying, you can't really be involved right now. Can we help in any way? Is there support? Do you want muffins? What can we do?
Of course we want muffins. Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I always want to be, it's hard to speak for everyone. I guess so I'll speak for myself. I'm really proud of the work the high school is doing. Students and staff, I think, are holding together and moving forward in a really challenging time. So I guess that's my answer. Of course, we want muffins, and I think staff members, I see appreciation go a long way.
Yeah.
So I think staff and students and the community members, I think when there's times to, legitimately express our gratitude to each other, I think it's really helpful. Yeah, so I could go on and on, but I won't. So I think we're doing.
Good. Thank you both.
Zoom members?
Zoom members, do you have any questions? Raise your Zoom hand. No Zoom hands, right, Will?
No.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you all very, very much. We appreciate it. Super helpful. And thank you for standing that up. Next up on the agenda is the minutes. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes of 11/8/2021?
I move that.
Chip, could I get a second? Sure. Jen, thank you. Questions, comments? Lindsay?
I attended remotely. I was Zooming, and on the minutes it says that I was in person.
Great. Make that note for change.
Thank you.
Barb?
Yeah, just two things. Under item C, when we talked about the previous minutes, from October 25th, I would like it to be a little bit clarified. I felt that the public comment related to the private data that she was sharing with the student not be included, not all comments, not be put in the, minutes. So there's a slight difference there. Great, that makes sense. And then if you go down further and we are talking about the committee discussions, facilities is in twice. Yeah, it got duplicated.
All right.
That was for emphasis.
I was like, I think I read this before.
Chip, quick comment. Thank you, Suzanne, for being very specific in the speaking of the different people. I appreciate that. And I thought the minutes read much better with that context in there. So thank you.
All right, Heather?
I have two little detail-oriented things. The first one under public comment, the gentleman Brian Arlene's, the last sentence, looks like a word is missing where masks should be optional is probably the word that should be inserted in there.
Just I want to make sure Suzanne gets that one. Where is that one?
It's in the last sentence of Brian Arlene's comment in the public comment section.
Gotcha.
Looks like there was a word missing. Also, in the committee updates part, the facilities part in there, the third paragraph of that says Victoria went over the letter originated by Victoria, Mary Heather Noble, et cetera, reviewed by, it says Peter Codman, but it should say Peter Burrows.
Yeah.
If that change could be made.
Great.
And then one last thing in, if we go back up to section C, the recommendation to approve the minutes of the 25th. I heard, and maybe y'all didn't, but I heard Mary Cullinane specifically asking the Communications and Engagement Committee to take a look at a template or pursue this, discuss this in our committee. So I would just add that to the minutes as long as you all also heard that.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
I get it, yes, I get it.
And that's all I have.
Any other,
Lorraine?
Lorraine?
Yeah, I just didn't know, in the part with the public comments, that last sentence before the Ripton School presentation section, I think it was you, Mary, that mentioned that people in the room, had to wear the mask, and if not, please leave. And since it was right under Judy's comments, I wasn't sure whether it was not clear as to who had made that comment that people in the room had to wear masks and whether it should be specified or not.
You can add Mary Cullinane asked those remaining in the room. Great. Great, so with those changes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any again? Great. Thank you. So moved. Next up, ACSD bills.
There's a bunch of bills, folks, bear with me, we haven't met for 5 weeks. First one's from 11/15/21. For the general fund, $413,001.62. From payroll, net pay, $819,481.11. And the third one, the net, 11/15, is $4,912.62. Second group is from the 22nd of November. We had 2 in a row there. General fund of $423,169.61. And payroll of $401.38. Other payroll warrant is $871,757.63. The third one, on the 12/6/21, is the general fund of $320,397.22, and a payroll warrant of $872,575.40. Those were read, and I think Barb and myself have read most of these, if not all of them. And I make a motion we approve.
Should we get a second? Barb, any questions or comments? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you. Next up, report of the superintendent.
Great, thank you. One thing I wanted to add to the superintendent report, which I think is exciting and long-awaited, our advisory committee for the strategic plan met for the first time yesterday. In the meeting, I commented I'm not part of the advisory committee, but I'm attending as a kind of a support. We have 2 folks here that attended. Ruth and Nicole, Ruth Bernstein in the audience, and Nicole Carter are both on that committee. Other folks on that committee, I just thought I would read these names off. Amanda Gomez, Addison Copeland, and Abigail Sunderland, who are our students. Crystal Brown, Ruth Bernstein, Leah Batches, Claire Benjamin, Christina Wadsworth, Michael Little, Jesse Witcher, Alejandro Perez, Esther Thomas, and then I mentioned I'm attending, and Emily Blistine, who is our Director of Communications, is also attending to kind of help support and steward, but we're non-voting members. And it's so exciting to finally be looking ahead. We've been in survival mode, I would say, for how long now? Quite a long time, where we really haven't had the time or capacity to be talking about what comes next for us. And I know we all care really deeply about that. It's one of the, I think, biggest challenges of the work right now in education is wanting to be leaning into this work that is so important and not having the time in our daily lives because we're covering for subs, we're doing all the things to keep schools running. And it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks as I was sitting in this meeting last week, realizing that this is really important work for us to be doing now as a community, so that we don't get stuck and stalled in kind of the challenges of the moment, and we can start leaning into the equity work that we have been talking about, we've been discussing relative to all the things that we've committed to as a district. So lots more information will be coming about this process. There's tons of community outreach on the horizon after break. The equity audit is the first chunk of this process that you will all be getting information from the advisory committee about both the audit and other community events to be a part of this process. The first on a report, this kind of segues into the first agenda topic here for me, which is the home supports. is an outline of some of the work that the central office has been supporting moms in. And I wanted to give Mike just a chance because we have been this fall spending a lot of time supporting moms and the work that moms has been doing as they welcome sixth graders, as they deal with, I think, the behavioral challenges that have been really unprecedented, and supporting kids who have now are in their third year of school, wearing masks and not back to normal yet, and the impacts of that on the social and emotional well-being, I think, of students and their staff. So I wanted to hand it over to Mike to share a little bit about what that work is, what we're doing right now, and probably open up for questions for me or Mike or Caitlin and Nicole, who have been spending lots and lots of time sitting alongside our staff, looking at all the different things that are happening and working on ways to make structural changes and other changes to make a difference. Mike.
So good evening, everybody. It's like I have an hour timeline. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Justin. I think I won an hour last time, so I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible. I'll share anything and everything with you. I do want to just start by saying, when I first started and looked at what's the entry plan for the new building principal, sort of that mantra always comes back about listening, learning, and leading. And I will add, from a listening standpoint, we're also living. So living, learning, and leading. And we're at a point where we're leading the work, which is really exciting for us. It's pressing, but we've done a lot of listening and learning. And with the help of central office, Dr. Furrows and Dr. Steele, Dr. Carter, we've been able to do a lot of work along with Karen and Andrew on my admin team and our staff. And I just want to be able to share some of the highlights with you. I know I've put out some community memos in there, just bullet points. Some of that I'll repeat, but some of the other pieces I'll just give you a little more detail so that you know and understand where we're coming from. But we've made significant progress since the last time that we spoke. I'm not sure how long ago that was, but it was a significant time. But we truly, what I've been able to gain and understand is that we truly have a community that wants to provide moms with the support, the resources, the energy, anything, the power of people coming into our building to help support. And I really appreciate that work. I know a lot of board members and community members have come in just to help volunteer. And we appreciate that work. And we'll talk a little bit about that on Thursday as well, but how we can continue to embrace that. But we've engaged in continued dialogue with our staff and our students to really assess what are those opportunities. And over the last few weeks, we've been processing the feedback, working with new ideas that emerged from a lot of the collaboration that's occurred, working with new ideas, mapping specific initiatives designed to improve the culture and climate of the school. We actually just left the meeting to really talk about and holding ourselves accountable to the work. And I really appreciate that. But three priorities have popped up. One, supporting teachers and moms to build relationships with our students by decreasing the number of students that they're serving. So ultimately, we're looking at how do we lessen the caseload, looking at teaming structure. That's really built on the budget that we'll propose a little later tonight. Improving our accountability system and addressing significant behavioral needs. So we do have a student response system that I'll go get into some detail with you. We're also looking at current structures and schedules to decrease the unstructured time, so a lot of the study halls, but also to increase opportunities for engagement and connecting with our peers and deepening relationships with adults. So as a learning community, we spent faculty meetings, so we had 1 hour faculty meetings on November 29th, on December 6th to collaborate, to engage in the work, to really from a data standpoint, really just look at the data to know and understand what the priorities are and thinking about what are those action steps. And we had a wonderful wonderfully planned 3-hour workshop on our early release day. That was on December 8th. And I felt that we were addressing the needs that we needed to at that point. So in terms of specifics, the goals that we were able to craft, one was just creating space in our budget for next year's budget to increase the number of teams. So the goal would be to have more teams and fewer students. We also revised the student response system for clarity, consistency, and accountability. So again, the goal there would be for all members of our moms community to feel safe, feel welcomed, and feeling ready to learn. We are looking at revamping our daily schedule to reduce study halls, ease the transitions. There's a lot of transitions between these half blocks that we have, making time for elements for just dynamic middle school learning community and thinking about the groups that we have there. So again, maximizing opportunities for relationship building, student engagement, targeted student learning support. And finally, we have our intensive student engagement program with a goal of meeting learning needs of our students that are struggling, or most struggling in the environment that we have currently. So that would be a separate program housed within our building that's structured, that's supportive, and will help with our community. So in terms of some highlights, let me just talk a little bit about our SRS, or student response team. So Nicole Carter was part of that. Karen Standard and Andrew Forty, along with a working group on that half-day release. But some of those key pieces that I felt I wanted to express with you was just that our code of responsibilities in terms of discipline won't change. However, specific measures, norms, procedures have been clearly articulated. And I think, if there's a one key difference between what we've had and where we're going, I think it really comes down to improved communication with students, to staff, to admin, and teachers with our community and our parents. So as an example, in terms of what we thought about in terms of norms and expectations, an example that we had was when students are asked to leave class, where do they go? And why are they directed to leave? So we came up with, there's six or seven very specific elements that we felt was really important, so that teachers didn't feel like they didn't have a clear sense of when to send students out of the room, where were they going, was it guidance, was it to the main office, was it to 109? So students were directed to leave class to go to 109 if they engage in the following behaviors. So some of those were if they refuse to follow directions or disrupt other students from completing their work. There's explicit or hateful language, physically threatening behavior, property destruction, threatening emotional harm to anyone or themselves. So we felt like that was just very specific action-oriented or just behaviors, and there was immediate next steps to that. Also with that, we have an accountability data form that will document all our behaviors and will be directly shared with faculty. So faculty express sometimes not knowing what came out of a scenario. So we will have a data form that I believe is online that we'll be able to share with faculty immediately. Communication with faculty, admin, students, and families will be timely and consistent based off the structures that we have. And basically the responsibilities for our staff and our admin that's going to be clearly articulated lends itself to just consistent dialogue with families. And we felt that was really important. Some families felt that they were sort of out of the loop in terms of the student behavior or their son, daughter, child behavior in class and getting immediate feedback and timely feedback. So we felt that was important. Second highlight, revamping our daily schedule and using the unstructured time. So Caitlin and I worked on that. Caitlin did a lot of work there. I appreciate the work that she was doing there. But a few key pieces that we were thinking about is how do we create safe, welcoming spaces for students to congregate in the morning? We realized now that it is getting colder, we needed to find and identify certain spots in our building, but also thinking about what was the purpose of that room. So we're looking at the library as a common calm space to get some homework done, quiet reading. We have our gymnasium for a healthy start, a little more active, and then we also have our cafeteria. But just defining those spaces and really thinking about what are those norms and expectations. But also, who's welcoming students into our building? I think that is really important. We have staff at our front doors, and being able to bring staff and students with it. Also thinking about reducing the instruction time. Including what does our flex time look like? What are those transitions? I think we could minimize some of the transitions between some of our blocks that some of our students struggle with going from classroom to classroom. So that's another big piece that we're looking at. Increasing student engagement in learning opportunities or learning experiences. So goals with that one would be to eliminate some of our WIN study halls. So WIN is what I need, and some of our students are using that time as a study hall. Folks have said that they don't want us to eliminate study halls, and we hear that, we know that. So we are looking to create structured study halls that are very specific for folks that want to utilize that time. We're also just thinking about how do we maximize student support, so our interventions and special ed services, and then finally thinking about we added a few staff members to our community, and thinking about, we have a personalized learning project or PIP that's happening with one of our new teachers, looking at our SEL work, our social emotional learning, media literacy. So how do we engage students in some of those very learning experiences? Two other pieces is just thinking about protected time for teacher collaboration. So a lot of our teachers were, their team time was during lunch flex. And the difficulty was trying for us to supervise our lunch area with a dedicated staff or cohort. So we were able to organize and structure a dedicated lunch recess duty team that would include myself, counselors, our wellness team, paras, and we're looking for community support to be a part of that, so that our teachers are not going to be pulled out of the team time for collaboration. So we're giving them that protected time to be able to use in a very strategic, formal way. Then finally, just thinking about study halls out of classrooms. That was one big thing that teachers were concerned about, was that when we had flex study halls, because we had to use shared spaces, teachers didn't feel that they could leave their room because they wanted to be there. So we had paras or subs or other staff members that were housing students in a foreign classroom. And so we're looking to minimize our study halls so that doesn't happen. And then finally, just thinking about our student engagement program that's being led by Nicole. And I just wanted to share quickly a few things. So they articulated this really nicely, but the program components, so it's a program that's focused on learning, to help students engage in school and they learn together, which I think is really important. This is a learning component for us. Students will be able to access their academic learning. So these are students that are just struggling in the mainstream classroom, the environment that they're in. But the framework, conceptual framework, which I really enjoyed reading when I did, was that rituals, routines, and relationships will be sort of the key focus of this program in order to help students regulate, relate, and reason. And part of that is the trauma-informed work. A lot of that is also thinking about the idea that all students can do well if they are regulated, have relationships, and are offered accessible learning opportunities. And then really thinking about what's that regulation, relationship programming through restorative practice, through community circles, through coping strategies, and so on. So I feel that program is beneficial. I'm excited that majority of the goals and the priorities that we're talking about, particularly the first two, most likely will be happening when we return from break, so January 3rd, in terms of the unstructured time and the morning pieces. I think the program for the engagement program will happen in January, but we are trying to fine tune that. So a lot of the information, the drafts programs, information is in the hands of our focus teams. They're in the work. We're constantly looking at how do we tweak it, how do we make this work for moms, and I'm super excited about that level of where we are. So that's just a brief summary, hopefully, brief of the work.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Sure. So the changes, it sounds awesome. So this is more of a selfish thing, since I was in months today and subbing. And with some of these changes, if there was a way to really prepare the subs to make sure that you're not losing ground, that's kind of what I struggle with. What are the protocols, the procedures, and those kinds of things that I need to adhere to? And ultimately, if I was in charge of a classroom, fortunately, I haven't in that case. But I was thrilled today when I showed up and it was like, oh man, I can do this, I can help with this. So that's my area. So that was great. But any way to ensure that the folks coming in to help subs, you can make sure that you don't set you back would be awesome.
No, that's a great point. And I think it's part of the admin team we were talking about. How do we prepare ourselves for the work that we're asking?
That's what I get nervous about. That's where I get my anxiety, going into the school. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to screw up with today?
No, I appreciate you being there. So, but I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
So we need to prepare, whether it's a one page or just looking at the changes, because that's something that even folks that are in our building, there is going to be a reset.
Yeah.
And we'll have to understand.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Other question?
I have a quick one, and I guess it's more of a feedback for us. You and I talked, Mike, about how we can help you provide some programming options, whether it's workshops or whatever, to alleviate some of the things that come up during those unstructured periods of time and ways for us to engage the community and have the kids experience some more, not necessarily academic learning, but exposure to things that folks in the community are doing. I'm just wondering how this board and how the community can best support that effort to help give you and students some options, to create programming in those areas.
So I think we've had a lot of conversations about that, and there's a lot of energy that's there. Quite honestly, it's just for me is to know and understand how to one, provide that framework. Specifically when we're talking about volunteers, we're identifying key times, key moments in our day that we're looking for folks, so that folks aren't just coming in and saying, oh, I'm here to volunteer. Where do you need me? I would rather have people feel prepared and not have that anxiety of walking into the building. Right. I think working with our team to know and understand that we do have community members that we want to be a part of that. I think that there's going to be a little of initial conversation at our community forum on Thursday, but I do see our community partnership council being a part of that. To your point, I think experiential learning is really important. So when we think about that flex block or that flex time or our win block, I mean, there's moments for some students that have a study hall or aren't completely engaged in some sort of enrichment, that they have an opportunity to be able to learn something differently. So I guess to answer your question, we just need to be able to identify that time frame and know and understand how to organize that structurally so that we get the right people at the right time and they have an idea of what those responsibilities are.
It does, and I guess my follow-up would be, where's the best place, if folks are coming with ideas, where's the best place to kind of, assemble those and then direct them in your building? Is it you, is it who on your team, what's the best way for us to help with that?
So I think initially, that's something that we would like to be able to define who that person is, I would say for me, initially, it would go through me for now, until I can find a designee to really help with that. And I'll give you, so Sarah Story, who's our admin assistant in the guidance department, she's going to be running one of the workshops on Thursday in terms of volunteering. So I'll hopefully have a better answer for you in terms of who is that significant person to be able to go to. But for now, without having anyone, I would say myself would be a great place to start.
Any other questions? Great. Well, Mike, thank you very much. Really, and please extend our gratitude to the staff and to the community at large. We've all seen the newspapers all over the country, and what is being asked by our educators to handle in this time, specifically in this area of culture and climate within buildings, is unprecedented. And so thank you very much to the entire team for what you're doing.
Great, thank you so much, for sure.
Peter.
Just before we move on from report to the superintendent, different topic, could I just ask a very quick question of the superintendent? And that is just, have we deployed Test to Stay, and how is it going?
We have, and it's going really well.
Great.
I've only heard good things. Kelly said it's working well, that, the postmarks and everything are working well. We're getting things back in time. So it's actually been a game changer. And we've had, as you've seen, if you follow our dashboard, if you're in one of the schools that has had cases, it's been responsible for keeping a lot of kids in school. Perfect. Which is why, as you all know, that the college last week went virtual as a result of the number of cases there. We feel like we've been able to handle the cases that have come up, and of course, we haven't had 20 in the school or anything. We've had 1 or 2, or it's been kind of consistent like that. But that has been the Test to Stay has been one of the things that's made it manageable. And the biggest thing is the interruptions of learning that happened previously are now not happening. It's a godsend.
Next up.
Next up is, if I can write that here. Budget. We are
Just a little topic, yeah.
Just a small topic. So FY23 budget development today is our precursor to draft 1. So draft 1 is coming next week, where it will provide information on the overview of the budget and specifics around the different cost centers in the budget. Traditionally, this meeting prior to the first draft is an opportunity to hear from principals about their planning going into next year and hearing a little bit about this year. Getting a sense of the budget climate. We have the tax commissioner letter attached in the agenda, so Logan will spend some time unpacking that for us, and that's a pretty key factor. Also talking about some of the cost drivers and budget drivers this year that we'll be talking about as we look at and reflect on the first draft. So I'm going to hand it over to Logan to take it away. His first run at a budget presentation, so be kind.
Well, to Chip's point, it's a big topic, but it's a relatively small topic tonight. The few things I will highlight will come after the principal presentations. They're each going to give a little 2 to 3 minute spiel. The theme, as they were directed, was around student needs in the current year and how next year's budget will address those needs, recognizing that filling staffing needs could be a struggle. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to the principals. They will be going in alphabetical order by elementary school, and then the middle school, and then the high school. So first up is Matthew Franklin.
And if anyone needs to go earlier, I know we have one person who requested to go earlier, sitting in the front, maybe if she could start out, and then Matthew, you could do.
But I won't know.
I'm trying to take care of everyone here.
That me?
No, I can do that.
Yeah. I'll go first.
I
I feel bad, but I've been sick and I have tested and I'm good, but I'm still not feeling great. So I just wanted to make it through this. Fernanda Canales, Salisbury, I think you guys know who I am. So with that challenge, I think I was trying to think about what to say, and it's really hard to not talk about the impact of the past 2 years. So I can't say that it's been easy or normal. In fact, I'm not really sure I know the meaning of the word normal any longer. Too much time has passed and many things have changed. To feel like we're going to return to things before how they were before the pandemic. And there's some good in that. We have some good learning. Life moves on and so do we. So we have been very fortunate at Salisbury, and I can honestly say that our students have been stellar at adapting to the changes we've thrown their way. This year, our community has been very well provisioned for, both in staffing and in any of the needs that we've had to meet. The students are learning, growing all the while, teaching us that you can still be you, whether you're wearing a mask or not. A snowy recess is still a reason for joy. At Salisbury, we have been fortunate enough to not have had to quarantine a class yet this school year. But I know that our nurse, Gina, has had to do this, right? I don't know why. And is fully prepared to help us should this happen at any moment. And with Test to Stay in place when it happens, it may turn out not to be so disruptive. So we're great that we've had this opportunity. We held 2 vaccination clinics at our school in November and December, in which half of our student body was vaccinated. With several other students getting their shots in other locations, we think our student population is about 2/3 fully vaccinated right now. We cannot thank our nurses enough for what they have managed and made happen for our schools this year. They're really the heroes right now. I can't imagine what our school year would be like without their daily work. The Salisbury staff has also been outstanding. The fact is that to keep us safe, absences, both of students and staff, have been numerous this year and frequent, sometimes for multiple days at once, and our staff has shown great flexibility and care to help cover for each other and support our community in any way possible. We are tired of body and of mind, but we still show up for the students and for each other and to find ways to be joyful, whether it is through a student-led gratitude campaign that we're having right now, monthly whole school celebrations like a picnic on a soccer field, or telling stories and listening to our budding chorus sing to us in a forest classroom by a fire. We find joy in the moments we're together. Our daily routines, I've heard Mike talk about routines of morning meeting, academics, including music, PE, art and Spanish, lunch, recess, and breaks, keep us focused and on task. We have 3 new teachers this year: Eliana teaching Spanish, Sierra teaching physical education, and Katie Cox teaching a combined 2nd and 3rd grade class. The first combined class that Salisbury has had in its history, really. It couldn't be easy to start your teaching career under the current circumstances, but these 3 folks are doing it with grace and commitment. It's admirable. We're also grateful for our parents' trust and support. They have been with us all along, even though they can't come into the building. They're incredibly supportive. As we look ahead, we're not looking to make any significant changes to our budget, which feels right. Our population won't be significantly different from this school year, and not knowing what is ahead, saying what seems wise. I couldn't be more honored and grateful for the people I get to go through a year like this with. They inspire me. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're back to the alphabet.
I don't know, I try on predictability. So if you go to, I'm Matthew Brankman, I'm the principal in Bridgeport, and if you go into my office, you'll see Linda Barrett, who actually runs the school. And the kids made a nice sign for her and said she is the best principal ever. So she should be here to do this presentation, and she's not because of the money. Bridgeport's having a really good year. We're really, the kids are thriving. The kids are thriving because they're awesome. The kids are thriving because parents are doing everything that they should be doing to support us. And the kids are thriving because our teachers and staff are We have challenges for sure, but things feel really calm. The kids are doing great. Learning is happening, and test to stay. It's a game changer. We're doing really well because we spent since this is my third year, and before that, focusing on SEL, social and emotional learning, focusing on early literacy, as we all are as a district, and really working on the school culture and climate and asking for what we need. And I have to say, when we've asked for what we need, we've gotten it from the district again and again and again. When we lost our special educator to another job late in the school year, the district came together and we were assigned a phenomenal special educator. When staffing issues have faced our pre-K because the licensing for pre-K is ridiculous, the district has shifted resources so that our pre-K can stay open 4.5 days a week, which means the world to the parents of those kids and their ability to work. And we're thriving because we're really a community, and we talk about Ruth Bernstein. We have this phrase, bubble of love. So inside our building, it's a bubble of love. We take care of each other. Teachers are going through a lot personally, privately. Kids are going through a lot, and in our school, we're safe and we take care of each other. Because we've spent so much time focusing on SEL, we've also had an opportunity to look at scheduling and to look at ways to make the day more predictable for kids. So the only big difference in our budget going into next year is we've spent this year providing our kids with the library program that they're accustomed to and that they deserve. But the shifts in the schedule and the way we're doing guidance and other counseling kind of dictate that library service happens 1 day a week. So because also we've gotten what we've needed every time we've asked, we're only asking for what we need, and what we need is 1 day a week of library instead of 2. And you're going to provide the same level of service that we have, but that's the only change that we're asking for. Barb, thank you for subbing.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And it was on a chaotic day. Yeah. But you did a great job. The kids did a great job, and I hope to see as many of you as possible. It really is it's really special, and it's going really, really well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can help with that.
I'm Heather Robb, principal at Cornwall. And I feel like we're already starting to repeat, and we're going to repeat. There's a lot of what I was going to say has been said. I can't think of how to say it without repeating. I'll just repeat some of it. So some of the highlights this year, we have had some highlights, we have had some challenges. But the highlights that really stand out do focus on enjoying each other and being part of a community. I think we've had to lean into that more this year, even more so this year than last year. As the year started, there was a lot of excitement that we could be together more. We could bring more classes together. We might not have to wear masks all year. And then that all kind of shifted. We have a phrase also. It's different from your phrase. Our phrase is we have a COVID yoga. So we have to be flexible and strengthen ourselves and be flexible and open-minded. And so when we have to shift, we have to flex those COVID yoga muscles, and we do it together. So that's, I have a hard time putting it into words. There's a feeling that is palpable and that is healthy and strong, even when things are challenging. I guess I can shift to the challenges then, but we're doing well, and our enrollment is strong. Our enrollment this year, even after the 6th grade moved, as you all know, this is the first year that we've been with just K through 5, and our enrollment is very similar this year as it was to last year when we had K through 6. And projecting, looking ahead to next year, it's predicted that we're going to grow by about 8 students. So enrollment is a highlight, and that's something that will help as far as budget goes. Challenges that go along with having to flex those COVID yoga muscles is staffing. So actually, that's a positive, it's a highlight and potentially a challenge. A highlight has been, as a result of the pandemic connected to staffing, is that the district, and which affects all of our schools, has been able to develop some new positions that really are making an impact. And so the positions of the SEL coordinator, the social emotional learning coordinator for the district, the position of the literacy coordinator, really going back to what do we need to focus on at the early stages of teaching literacy, are making a difference, and we can feel that difference. The teachers can feel that difference. The teachers are feeling heard as a result of working with those people who are working district-wide. So those are positives that I'm hoping potentially, as we move our way out of the pandemic gradually, are things we can try to hold on to, and make sure that we don't just see them as a one and done type thing. I'm really hoping that can happen. Challenges with staffing are more so with our support staff. We have fantastic and very, very dedicated classroom teachers. And like many areas around the country and in Addison County, hiring is hard. And so other positions, like our paraprofessional positions, or we do need a long-term sub right now, those are hard to fill. It is hard to find people, and it's affecting all industries. So that is a challenge. And I guess I just want to say that despite the challenges, I've already indicated, morale is good. And we're really, really, really grateful to the district community and the support from district and the Cornwall community and support for people at Cornwall. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Travis, I'm the principal for Amadon. So I thought a lot about kind of what I wanted to say and wanted to think about like where we are now and where we're going. And I think that I've written in a lot of the board reports that you all read is that like there's a real focus on the Mary Hogan core values of belonging, connection, growth, and respect. And those were core values that we developed together and a couple of years ago and reaffirmed this year at the beginning of the year. And that like sense of belonging and connection is obviously like foundational to everything that we've done this year in particular, like the pandemic, like we went into this year obviously thinking one thing and another has come, and that's okay because I think we can all lean on each other, and there's amazing staffing at Mary Hogan as well as parents and students. And so that sense of belonging and connection feels just foundational. And you see it from like classroom work, a basic play, getting outside, and this focus on like a shared responsibility for everyone in the class to ensure the freedom that exists within the class. And that's really apparent, and those conversations are really apparent. You know, having a win block for all the grades in our school schedule this year for the first time allows more opportunities for practice, and it means that everybody's practicing. So it's not only students who are struggling, it's everybody practicing. And that grades are doing what's best for students. And some are mixing up rooms and providing them with time to do passion projects. But like, again, it's all about connection and belonging. So like belonging to a grade, not just to a class. We're using systems so that counselors, school-based clinicians, SEL staff, and administration are collaborating at multiple meetings weekly to field teacher concerns around students and make sure that they get the appropriate levels of support. And we're looking to connect with each other in this like COVID context where like it's not last year where we had to stay in our rooms, but it's not the year before last year, right? And so it's like finding that sweet spot, which is different at Mary Hogan because there are so many kids that you can't just have an all-school meeting, but you can have the 5th grade to the principal's challenge at the end of the read-on, right? And as we get more and more students vaccinated, we have plans for how we can get more and more people together. And the first students are at their 2-week out mark from getting their shots. So we're just rolling into that. It feels great. And then I think the most exciting part of the year is like what you guys have already heard about, which is the artist in residency with Mike Can and Claire Tubbs. And it's super exciting to walk into our classes and to have kids like show you their art, piece of art, and say like, this is Mary Hogan and this is our core values, and like talk through their artwork. And it's super detailed and really exciting. And they're having these conversations not just in the art room, but also in their classes through the units of inquiry. Is really foundational. And I think, you know, growth, that value of growth speaks to like the academic supports as well as the SEL, right? So we're like trying to make sure everybody feels connected and has the skills to be regulated, but also has the academic skills. And I think, you know, we can see where the pandemic has impacted kids. Like, you know, we're talking with somebody at the state level, you know, kids have come back to school like 2 years, social emotionally behind where they were. And so like meeting them both where they are in terms of belonging and connection, as well as meeting their academic needs feels important. And teachers are using really awesome, like are really collecting data, are having fidelity programs, and are having those data-driven conversations. And you know, we're super, I'm just really grateful for everybody who's at Mary Hogan. I think the teachers and staff are working tremendously hard. It's been a complex year. I'm super grateful for our counselors, our school-based clinician, and behavior consultants, and special educators who are teaching kids these like important foundational skills. And I think the person, just as Fernanda said, the person who kind of is most amazing this year is Nurse Becky, because she's no longer just a nurse, she's also like a lab tech, and she's like running, you know, she's running so much of the school and to keep us all in session. And Peter, like what Matthew said, like test to stay is amazing, and it works, and you know, it's pretty straightforward and easy. So as more kids get vaccinated, we'll have both, and it will, it's huge to let kids stay in school. And the pandemic, pandemic is the thing, right? Like that's the stressor. And I feel like we're recognizing that and also trying to moving together through it, right? We can't do anything but move through it together. So, you know, the budget for next year really reflects like the work that we're doing this year and like moving through the pandemic together. So there are no major changes from what we got, you know, where we are this year in terms of staffing. The budgeted positions are the same. We'll have some grant-funded positions to our Title I grant, and they're roughly the same number of students. So that all makes sense to me. There'll be 2 preschool classrooms, 21 classrooms in K through 5. And we determine the sections later in March after the budget passes, as in a collaborative process with teachers that's been established. And then the only other budget thing is like Bruce and I have been working together around facilities and capital plans at Mary Hogan. So you'll hear more from him on that, but that's it.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Tracy Harrington. I'm the principal at Burton Elementary. I presented a couple of weeks ago, so you have a really good idea of how Burton is doing. I don't have a lot more to add. I echo what so many people have said. The year has definitely had its ups and downs, but for the most part, we are really grateful for all of the things that we can be doing that we couldn't be doing before. We're looking forward to having some of the traditions like artist in residency or hopefully getting to go back to Brentford in the snowball to ski. And we have opened up in terms of classes being able to have experiences that are shared. And so overall, I think we are recognizing how there is a new normal. The kids are incredibly resilient, they're positive, they're full of joy, and it's always just so wonderful to be with them every day.
We did have some changes this year, as we discussed. We went from 4 classroom teachers to 3, and we have also been able to gain a half-time interventionist, and we're looking at the same staffing really for next year as was already discussed. I can't say enough about the staff, just like so many people, but like Matthew, I think someone else should be here telling you more about what's going on than me practically this year, but the staff is incredible and they are fully dedicated and so passionate about working with kids, and I think next year will be the same, and we'll see where it takes us. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Mike Lennox, Shoreham, and as people are starting to say, as we get further and further into this, a lot of what everyone else is experiencing is what we're experiencing. But if I think of a few things that might stick out unique to Shoreham Elementary and the budget is, I think we had people after a budget presentation in prior years that said, hey, Mike, what isn't in your budget request that you would want to put in the budget request if you could put more? And it would have consistently been, I'd like to have more social emotional staff in the building. And with the repercussions of the pandemic and with the resources of the ESSER funds, we added interventions position. And that position was open for quite a while as we were looking for candidates. We've also had significant teacher change. Half of our classroom teachers were not in Shoreham last year. They all are experienced ACSD teachers who moved to us. So I feel very blessed to have their experience and understanding, but that is a big change for a school that's had a lot of consistency for a long time. Over half of our special education staff is new to the building this year, but again, not really new to ACSD. But as I said, we've had several openings, and last week was the first week of the school year where every position that we have is filled and filled well. So, right. So I feel very lucky and blessed to be at the point right there, and I feel grateful for all the support that people have as we moved through different openings, and I feel very well supported by central office in filling those positions. So there's gratitude going in a lot of different directions with that. And I think that those positions are well suited for what we want to do, and I'm grateful that the budget that's going to be presented has us remaining level funded with staff. So I'm optimistic for our future and grateful for all the people who are helping us get there. The final thing I want to say is I want to echo the test to stay being a wonderful thing, allowing kids to safely be in the building. I mean, that's kind of the biggest paradigm for like everything we've been trying to do since the pandemic started, is how to have kids be present so they can learn, but yet safe. And that's really been powerful. And I know I've seen the test to stay cause our school nurse and my admin assistant to work exceptionally hard. And it's worth it because it's allowing the kids to be present in the building. So another moment for everyone.
So I'm going to share for Weybridge. Christina was not able to make it. She sent me some notes. I'm going to read her notes. She anticipates enrollment to remain roughly the same classroom configuration as this year. K1, the K3, and the 4-5. Only anticipated status change will be the increase of a paraprofessional from 0.6 to 1.0 to ensure programmatic coherence. She's also grateful for the 2 new ACSD positions, the district social emotional learning coordinator and brief interventionists have significantly enhanced their work to support students, decreasing a reliance on ad hoc fixes for situations that need more comprehensive approaches. Both positions have afforded us a clear path to enacting Act 173, which we'll be hearing more about next month. Okay, so I think we're on to Mike.
Middle school. All right. So this is my first budget presentation with ACSD, so just learning and listening has been great. To be honest with you, I think the other day, somebody said to me, Mike, this is last year at this time, we did not have a school that was full of students. Even, my previous district, we were either remote, we were hybrid, half cohort A, cohort B, and I know that a lot of our students were in buildings, but I don't think it was as stable as it is today. So for my big win, my celebration is just having a school building full of students and staff. I think is awesome to kind of get back to some normalcy there. One of the things that Dr. Burrows mentioned in our first leadership meeting or retreat was finding the joy in our work. And, to be honest with you, it's been a challenging year for all of us. And I've made it a point to really think about what am I getting out of today that will put a smile on my face and put a smile on our students, our staff members, and so on. So I think what I've seen in our building is just staff, students being silly. I think laughter and humor is really important. A lot of our teachers are taking risks with their curriculum and their assessments. I think is extremely important that they're doing that. A lot of our students are doing assessments and projects that they find value in, that are interested to them. They're sewing, they're painting, they're cutting, I've seen rockets in the hallway. I mean, there's just a lot of positive energy in our building. And that to me is something that I always look forward to when I'm walking through the hallways. In terms of just staff, our students, our community, I mean, I think there's a few words that come to mind. Being thoughtful, being reflective, adaptive, solution-oriented, or solution-focused. Every day I'm floored with the talents, whether we have artists or poets or athletes. Our educators have been super flexible, super patient with some of the behaviors and challenges that we've had in our building. And everyone in our building is doing what they feel is right to move our building in the right direction. So, I mean, those are just some of the celebrations that I wanted to talk about. A lot of my points are budget related. I do and am requesting a few things in the budget that I'm hoping that people can just listen to. But I've spent a lot of my time just listening and trying to understand where MUMS was, where it is today, and where we want it to be tomorrow. And a lot of the conversations with staff, conversations centered around this new grade configuration from 7 to 8 to 6, 7, and 8th grade, and being able to understand and unpack what were the priorities and the conversations that folks were having prior to me being there. And a lot of it really centered around teaming, structures. So that to me, I think is the key element for me when I'm looking at a budget proposal. As you know, MUMS, our grade configuration, our teaming is one team of 6, one team of 7, one team of 8. I know there was a lot of options that staff members at MUMS were discussing during the transitional phases. And our team this year is what I'm sensing is that they're prioritizing having smaller, more personalized teams over looking at preps. So that to me, I think is a clear shift in our focus. And our efforts are looking at creating at minimum 4 teams at MUMS for next year. And we are really eager to collaborate with our teachers and our staff to really find what that model will look like for MUMS. So in terms of timeline, we don't have a specific structure that we want to have in place. We are looking at 2 or 3 structures that we'd like to be able to put on the table to collaborate with our staff and our students, or actually just our staff, and really put some significant time and energy in that collaboration. But the overall sense is that we are looking to have smaller teams so that we have closer personalized relationships with our students. So with support of what I would ask for would be 2 additional locally funded positions, along with maintaining our ESSER funded positions. That will allow us to have some flexibility with building our structures and teams as we go into the month of January. So what does that mean in terms of impact for budget? In terms of instructional supplies and equipment, we'd like to have that level funded. I would like to propose 2 additional staff members to support through local funding. Our counseling position, we had a 0.8 position that we would like to make a 1.0, so that we would have 3 full-time counselors. And then we'd like to be able to maintain those positions that we have in ESSER funding right now, which are 5 positions. So that would be the budget proposal. There were some conversations about requesting assistant coaches for some of our sports with the addition of larger teams, larger cohorts of students. So having some assistant coaches would be something that our extracurricular team and program involved. So that's my question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take that one next and last. I'll stand over here now, because I guess that's the. So I asked myself a couple questions. I didn't exactly know what to present, but I, like others, asked kind of where we are. And I think a snapshot of where the high school is that I see our students and staff as being strong, but also tired, as the sort of cumulative stress of this time just goes on and on. As others have said. The high school this year, we hired 14 new staff members, and a majority of our students haven't witnessed normal MUHS. So I think that was notable to me coming in and just kind of seeing the tremendous change in our school. But it's been really great to be in person and to have all of these kind of, I call them firsts. They're not really firsts, they happen all the time routinely, but to see our students perform a play in person and have an audience in front of them, have a band concert, a choir concert, to see a basketball game the other night. All these firsts, I think, are really healthy and are good for us. So where are we going? I think we are in the process of sort of rebuilding and reestablishing who we are as a school. And it sounds kind of almost hyperbolic to say that, but I think it's true. You know, it's been such a disruption that we're really reestablishing that sense of who we are. We need to take care of each other. I think we're doing that, and that needs, as others of my colleagues have said, that just really needs to be at the forefront of our minds. And I think we have to build community as a school across the things that divide us. And I think just, again, maybe straying towards hyperbole, but in our community, this community, and more broadly in our society, there are things that divide us, and I think as a high school, we have to dig into some of that and really build community across those divisions. How do we do that work? A few things that come to mind for me. I think we need to continue to use EduSpeak for 1 second. To deepen our commitment to universal design for learning. I think what that really means is making sure that our curriculum is accessible to all of our students, and really diving into that work. We need to communicate student progress in easily understood language. So students, parents, and community need to know how we're doing. And I think I said this earlier, but I think we need to seek out and act upon student feedback. So we really need to pull our students into that conversation. And as we're doing this work, make sure we know what their lived reality is. And then lastly, and I guess that's most specific to this budget process, what do we need? Kathy and I and our team have been looking at some internal reallocation, so that's not really a budget increase, but specifically to make sure we have some more electives and some more elective course offerings for our students. We would like to have a bit more support for math, so we want to have a learning lab model that really is best targeted towards the humanities. So we'd like to add a paraprofessional position to provide some additional support in the area of mathematics. It's potentially fitting that we're in this room. This is our band room. We'd like to make our band position full-time to increase accessibility to music lessons for all students and potentially increase programming. That's currently a part-time position with shared moms. looking at that full-time. And lastly, we would like a part-time appointed FTE theory of knowledge teacher. You'll hear TOK or theory of knowledge bounced around. That is both a requirement of IB and a local graduation requirement. And it's staffed with little pieces across multiple departments, which is a decent model, but there's really no one who has their eye fully on that course, which is required of all of our students for graduation. So creating a lead teacher will really give that a little bit more of a focus, and also the backfilling of that would allow us to create some more elective options for our students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we had planned to present the FY23, some of the overview, and I don't know what time it is now. Just conferred with the chair. I think it would be really easy to move Logan's presentation on his memo and a few of the other pieces into our first draft presentation next week. So if that's okay, and Chip, are you?
Yeah, Finance Committee has heard this presentation, so I think that'd be appropriate.
I do want to say, first of all, thank you all for sharing that, those perspectives. And, there's not too many media outlets or conversations that you can have that the headline's not negative, to be quite honest. And to hear each of you speak with such positivity and recognition of challenge, but still with a foot forward, taking a step towards what's possible. It's refreshing. It really is refreshing. And I consider myself lucky to be able to have heard that for the past few minutes. So thank you all for that work and for sharing that. Really, really great. Yes, you can also go home now. Thank you all very much, and enjoy what's left of your day.
Thank you.
Right, so the plan will be, folks, then for the next board meeting, we're going to roll in the budget memo discussion and we'll review into that. Just also as a note, we're also going to take for the second part of the report of the board, the communication engagement committee update, and we're going to move that next week as well. Okay. All right. So with that, great. With that, we're going to get to the section of report of the board. What I have asked representatives from Richmond to do is provide a summary overview of the outline that they have shared with all of us, that I shared with you via email. And then I've also asked for the opportunity that if a board member has a question that needs clarification based upon the information that we have, Mr. Cash is going to be here to answer any of those questions, clarifying questions that we have of him. I'll ask that from a time perspective, we do limit those clarifying questions from board members to, let's say, one at this point, so we can begin that discussion. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to Joanna.
Thanks. And thanks for your perseverance in making adjustments to the agenda based on the time. It is our understanding that as board members, you have already been presented with the outline and examples document we shared with the executive committee on November 11th. Thank you for this opportunity to engage and highlight the important context of these requests. Our proposal outlines several changes we hope you will consider making to the ACSD charter. The changes more clearly define school closure parameters, strengthen the process of both grade reconfiguration and school closure, and establish local input by way of advisory groups and nomination of board members. To support our proposed changes, we have included specific examples of current articles of agreement the State Board of Education has already reviewed, vetted, and approved for other unified districts that merged under Act 46. As part of your discussion, we hope you will consider how these changes better reflect equity and fairness to a community that was part of an accelerated merger process. The work you are doing now as a board is important. The list of challenges before you is long. Between COVID recovery and its ongoing management, new systems and staff, and shifts in grade configuration, we have a lot on your plate. Trust, cooperation, and rich deliberation can be agents of positive change. When those in power listen to and incorporate all voices, there are greater chances of positive outcomes. By examining the power you wield and the responsibility that comes with it, you are validating the role we collectively share in the education of our children. If you are indeed committed to equity, shouldn't it exist in all dynamics and levels of our district, especially at the governance level? We believe this is a first step in hopeful collaboration. The examples we have offered are meant to be guidance we can build upon. The nuances of specific metrics and how local advisory groups are established are meant to be fluid and fit the context and need of our district. In the end, I'm reminded of the people who build and continue to love and support our schools and kids. We believe we all deserve a voice in our future. As the SBE has indicated, we are in uncharted waters. There are no guardrails for how to manage this specific situation, and so we have the room to consider all possible scenarios. We share a common ground of commitment to our children, and that is a foundation we can build upon. Burton School Board intends to work with ACSD in good faith and try and find the right solution. We hope you will, in mutual good faith, give our proposed adjustments a fair and complete assessment. We look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. As you all know, the executive committee met with representatives of the Burton School Board, and at that time of the meeting, I had shared, the executive committee is not in a position to conduct a negotiation during that meeting. It's not the role of the executive committee, it's not the charter, it wouldn't be appropriate. Our role was to listen and then to bring back and share what had been presented. And so we did that formally in the document, but most importantly, I think we're going to have a conversation as to what we understand to be requested in the position of this board with regards to a response to those requests. And so what we thought we would do tonight is to start to have that discussion. We do not anticipate by the end of this evening we're going to have this figured out. So we should set that appropriate expectation. But I do think that we clearly need to, given time requirements that the State Board of Ed is placing to get an update, we need to have a very productive and valuable conversation. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the board if they have any clarifying questions from the Burton School Board that would help you all have a better understanding of what they're asking, or from what you've read, were there any questions or concerns that you would like the Burton Board to provide additional information?
I have one.
Yes, Jeff.
Anyway, and it has to do with number 4, localize the process of nomination for school board members. I know all the way along through this process from the beginning, there was this question of how do people get voted to the school board? From what I can gather from our charter, I don't think any of this towns nominate members, but there has to be a member on the school board from Ripton, period. Now, there could be 5 people running for that position in Ripton or in Weybridge or wherever, and when we all vote on it as the greater community, we get a choice between them. So I wasn't clear as to this process of localizing the process of nomination for school board members, because it wasn't clear in the end of it, that you were wanting to change it so it was voted individually by town. Correct? I mean, you see my point?
Yes, I can understand this confusion. I'm happy to address the question. So in number 4, so this is basically just examples of potential places to start. What we had contemplated was that people who are on the ballot would be nominated in the town they're from. The voting would still take place at large. If there was interest in also having those people elected on a town-by-town basis, that's a conversation we could certainly have. So that's just kind of the starting point to begin from, be that nomination in the town where that individual would be representing.
Just to clarify, but I don't understand how this is different, how this request is different than what's happening right at the moment. If I want to run for the school board in Middlebury, I don't get nominated by somebody in Middlebury. I get things that they come up and I'm there. And I have to get enough and then they vote on whoever is running for that position.
Yeah, so number 4, the way things are currently structured can occur in that, say, I was going to represent Burton on this board. I could only get signatures from around Burton to get nominated to be on the board. So it can potentially happen. What this would do is require that that person who is going to be on the ballot in that town get those signatures.
Okay, yes, I wasn't clear enough. Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? Great. So I think the first thing to get clarity on is changing the charter and what that would mean. And so I want to make sure that we're all clear as to what it means to change the charter and what that process would have to look like. And so Peter Conlon, if you could help a little bit here with regards to, you were the chair that started through that process the first time. Could you talk a little bit about what it would mean to change a charter?
I'll try, since I was the chair after the charter was created. And maybe Suzanne could jump in if anything else needs to be added. But I think the most important bottom line is it's the voters who change the charter. We don't change the charter. I think that, we have, I assume, the ability to propose charter changes to the voters. And we can certainly develop those, but then ultimately it's voted on, just like we vote on the budget, by everybody in the community. I'm not sure if we have a whole lot more to say than that about.
But doesn't Ripon have that chance too?
Sorry?
If we as a board have that, they as a representative board, don't they have the same ability to present, put up something to present to the community? Or don't they?
I guess you're talking about the independent Ripon School Board.
Yeah.
I assume so. I can't really actually, I don't know. Probably not even governed by the charter as it is, because you are one unit.
Yeah, at this point, we don't have any articles of agreement for a charter.
Generally, charters and articles of agreement are when you have multiple towns coming together. Yeah. And otherwise, you're governed by statute.
And so that, from a timing perspective, would be a March experience.
Well, you can call a vote as we did, going through much of this process. You can call a vote at any point in time. People look to town meeting day as a time to because you're going to get good turnout and good attention to it.
So I just want to make sure folks have that as context as we.
So just to add to that timing, however, that really means you got to make decisions in January.
Okay. Great. So I think if we talk a little bit about each of these, that will be beneficial as we go through this. And so the first around provisions for closure of the school. And my comment during the meeting that we had with the Burton School Board was, I'm not sure I have agreement that all of these ideas need to be reflected in a charter. And so is there opportunity for us to have a common, for us to identify areas where we agree at a macro level, and then to find ways in policy that those agreements could be reflected. And so I think that's also something that we need as a board to consider. And so this first one with regards to provisions for closure of the school, I would argue that the concept of having clarity around why we're closing the school, we should all be able to agree to. I think that sounds that having clarity is a good idea. Where that clarity sits with regards to articulation and the specificity of that articulation, the devil's in that detail. And how do we think about that? There were examples that were shared by the Burton School Board that reflected different ways of looking at all of these things. And can imagine a world in which there is great specificity for closing a school, meaning multiple variables that have to be met. You could also imagine a scenario where those variables are limited to financial. So do we get to a point where if you are an X percentage over student spend, i.e. that it's costing more to educate a child in that school at a significant rate because of enrollment or whatever, that would trigger a discussion of whether or not that school remains a viable school. And so I guess the question for us to discuss now is, do we, in theory, want to articulate some level of specificity around why this board would choose to close a school? And how do we think about that as a board? Yes, great.
I agree that I think that when this district gets to a point where we're considering specifics around consolidation, that there need to be very distinct parameters around what it takes to close a school. But then I think about this district being in a situation, a hypothetical situation, where we've got 7 great schools and we still have to close a school because we just can't afford to keep all 7 great schools open. And then the parameters that we've set up almost go out, I don't want to say they go out the window, but they become less important, or not less important, but they don't help you because you've got 7 great schools and not enough money. So I feel like if to have something as detailed as this example in the charter handcuffs us a little bit, and that I would rather see specificity around closure of schools in a policy of some sort, and have that policy be created when we're at that point of consolidation, so that we can tackle, we know the environment in which we are having the discussion, and we sort of can answer the questions or address the factors that are specific to that, whatever time frame we're in.
Barb? Yeah, great, thanks. I think in the charter, there could be the identification that there will be these other documents created before you would close that would have the policy and the procedure and the criteria that you're going to use. Not put all of those criteria in the charter because they could change, but that it is requiring us as a board to really consider these areas and ensure that we're addressing those and that we create the supporting policies and procedures that are needed in order to get to that data-driven approach. Because I think if we, when we close a school, it's always going to be hard, right? And I think when you have good schools, it makes it even harder, which then requires even more diligence on how we're going to look at the data and decide how to close it, because otherwise it's going to be look biased and it's going to be, when the public looks upon it, depending on where you are. So if we had something very articulate that when we got to that point, okay, we're going to look at these aspects, we're going to grade it this way, it's hard. And maybe we need help to do that, right? Most likely we need help to do that. But I think in the end, it's going to get much more acceptance. People still not be happy, but at least they understand how we got there. So the charter change to me is really looking at what are these vehicles that we're going to use and make sure that we create and spend time on not to put all that detail in the charter, but that it's like we're gonna use this data-driven approach. Did that make sense?
I think one of the things, like in concept, it makes sense, to me, right? Like outline the parameters by which you make this decision. The difficulty I have is, you know, when the board is looking at its collective resources, and it may be looking at a few schools that are struggling with enrollment, or but the decision about how to design the footprint there are all sorts of other variables that go into that decision making, including geography, including, you know, whether or not a structure can be added to, whether the distribution of pupils, or it could allow for reallocation of students from one place to another. I mean, it's a much more complex problem-solving process that, to me, if you set up this like if then this kind of thing, especially in a charter, I really do worry about, does that reflect the actual decision-making process and problem-solving process? And I struggle with, I mean, I do think it's important for the board, if and when, you know, getting to that crossroads, heads down a path, I think it's very important to outline, you know, the sort of criteria and memorialize the criteria to have the thinking, but to sort of predict ahead of time, well, it's going to be these things, I worry about it not really reflecting the sort of complex problem solving that's involved in this. And then the other element is, you know, setting up these gates. You know, it reminds me a little bit about of kind of qualifying for special education. Frankly, you have your gate 1 and your gate 2, and it's really, really difficult to get through gates, right? And it's sort of designed that way. And the thing that I worry about is how then is the board supposed to be managing the allocation of limited resources to the other places that our students are going, right? Like, this seems very sort of small elementary school centric. It's not looking at all the districts and all the students that we are responsible for providing resources to. So I have real trepidation about codifying something specific, especially in a charter. I have real trepidation about that.
I can't see the hand. Yes, Suzanne.
So the one question I have is, when we did the original articles, our thinking was that the articles were more geared towards the rights and responsibilities of the board, meaning that ultimately the board is responsible for overseeing the finances of the school and such. And so the ultimate decision on closing a school lies, if we're going to continue with that issue, is with the board, but in the process of how we get to that is written in policy and procedures. So if you're thinking about, is it an article or for a charter, or is it a policy? I think that's where my brain is going. I mean, a lot of the information that's provided is more about policy. And, you know, I hate to ever tie a board's hands going further down the road. I think policies and procedures can, you know, get at the same thing that the Ripton people have provided in number 1, but I'm not really sure that it needs an article change based on our thoughts when we first did the articles and based on, some research that I've done around what articles mean as far as charters and government bodies. My thoughts.
Thank you. Other comments on this one? Sure.
Majority town approval has been an issue, obviously, right along. That particular issue takes away from what Act 46 was meant to do, and consolidation was trying to get away from schools were totally centered, both governance and other ways, in a specific town. Now, that hasn't always worked, but in actual fact, that was meant to consolidate the educational systems. A more group can have to be Salisbury School or Ripton School or whatever. But if a town has to vote on closure individually, I think you would be totally, I think you'd be stymied somewhat in this. And to me, it's actually more of a having a supermajority of the board having to vote on it is actually a better way than looking to the town itself. It's not a better way for the town, who thinks that they should have the total control over that. But if in fact the community voted for this charter to begin with, which basically took that away, I, as a board member, I don't think I would give that up. Not to me, I would.
I do wonder, given the requirements of a supermajority to close a school, are we not embedding within that requirement then an expectation of articulation as to why that school is being closed? And as a board, if we're saying that we need to convince a supermajority of people on this board that are elected and represent the district as a whole and come from the communities in which we serve, are we being unrealistic in assuming that there would be then a natural expectation for there to be clearly articulated reasons as to why that school is closing?
I think that's
Absolutely. No, I think that's safe. I'd say that's a safe assumption. Jen?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the difference that I'm seeing is defining the clear data-driven parameters. So I feel like as a board during the facilities master plan, we were compiling data and we were analyzing data about the district. And I think the difference is we're being asked to almost target schools and say this school is failing and we should close the school because it's failing. And that was never anything that I was envisioning as a board member. I was envisioning how can we best utilize our resources and what facilities can we utilize to best educate our students. It was never about, is the school meeting educational standards? I think all of our schools are phenomenal in meeting our educational standards. And so I think for me, we had data that we thought made sense. And I think when you're living in a town where your school may close, you may not be able to see the data in the way that we were seeing the data. We were seeing the data as clear facts about our district and what our needs were. And perhaps if you're in that school and you're kind of almost being defensive, like, but my school's great and here's the reasons why, there's different data to show that. And I think what I would argue is all of our schools are great. And the problem is we have declining enrollment. And we as a district need to be able to educate our students in a way that they have increasing needs. We've heard about the needs from our principals, and I'd rather put more money and more resources toward those needs as opposed to toward more buildings. And that was the data that I was trying to come up with over the past few years. Unsuccessfully, because I feel like we're still having this conversation that if we need to sort of defend why we're closing a school in a town and identify the reasons why we're closing that school in a town, and that's not what I feel like this project would be about. I don't feel like that's why we'd be closing the school. One second.
Yeah, in the end of, we have to have a way to look at all the data and make sound decisions. And having followed this for quite a long time, to be honest, even now, I'm really confused as to how we can use that data that we've generated and really fairly close a school. And it's all this, you know, if you get the impression it's gonna be, well, a bias kind of thing, because it's, we have to really look at that data and be able to really articulate, well, why this school, not this other school? What are we going to be looking at? And it's not good enough to basically just say, well, you know, I think maybe I can't add on to the school without really even substantiating that. You know, some of the data that we have wasn't even necessarily true. So I really fear that unless we come up with something more data-driven, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. It's always going to be a biased kind of a solution. And it's going to be painful. And regarding voting, you know, I think there may be some of our towns that would vote, yes, I would like to vote in my school. It takes a village to educate kids. And it's really important to know that, hey, this town is really, you know, supporting their school and wants that school there, as opposed to a community that maybe isn't as concerned about having a school there. It finds it maybe a liability. So it's important to know that too, as we're making a decision, because the community really helps support that school.
Hey, Heather. So I'm trying to clearly articulate my thinking around this. I think, you know, the danger in picking parameters that include things like, you know, community involvement, or, you know, community's passion for its school, or I think that really, to me, makes me uncomfortable, because there are going to be communities for whom, you know, the student population and the families there don't have the bandwidth to do that. So that's tough, and I struggle with that. The other thing is that, I mean, we have to remember that, look, you know, all the schools are funded by the state. And right now, you know, I know this may change, but, you know, the money we get for each equalized pupil varies on the type of pupil, but we don't get, the state doesn't say, and here's the weight for students who go to small school. And it's more money because it costs more to educate them. And so basically, the state is kind of shifting that decision-making onto the local community. So that's why we're having this conversation in the first place, because the state is that, here's your money, here it is for these pupils. And, you know, everybody knows that it costs more per pupil for small schools, but, you know, the state isn't funding its education that way. So we have limited resources that we have to determine where those resources go. And while, you know, the identity of the community is so centered around schools, and it is so important, that's not part of our mission. It's not part of ACSD's mission to fund a school because, you know, it's important to the people who live there. We have limited resources, and we have to figure out where we're going to put those limited resources to serve the students. And I don't know how to reconcile this, right? Like, this is, I mean, it's made me shake right now, because I don't know how to solve this problem, but I'm very weary of, particularly, you know, to codify a process in articles, of limiting a decision-making body's ability to allocate its resources. And I feel like, I guess I would agree with Suzanne in that, you know, if we were to decide, you know, here's the process by which we would consider closing a school or whatever, I feel like That's a conversation I feel comfortable having at a policy level, not at an article of agreement level. And when we do have that conversation, it's going to be a really hard, difficult conversation. But to me, I keep going back to like ACSD's mission is about the students. And those include all students, not just elementary school students, they include secondary school students. And when we keep having this conversation, there's so much emphasis on, elementary school kids and elementary school families and these communities, and I agree with all of that. But in the meantime, while we're trying to figure out what to do, and we keep sending limited resources to places that are not fully enrolled, that money's got to be stretched from elsewhere. And I would want to know, as a board member, like, how does this proposal secure programs and funding for our secondary students? How do we feel certain that, for 3, 5, however many years this is going to go on, that our secondary students are going to suffer and will continue to suffer? Deferred maintenance continues and all that. I'm starting to go off into the woods, I'm sorry.
I do think that, Peter.
Ultimately, our job as board members is to weigh the pros and cons of everything in front of us and make it a hard decision. And, when you get into, something like this, it's almost more like you're just plugging data into a computer program and having the answer handed to you. But when it comes to how much money we put in our budget, how much money we do this, how we address that, we are always going to be making, you call it biased decisions, I would say subjective, I would say informed decisions that ultimately we have to make as the governing body of this district. And I would echo others and say I'm wary of a highly prescribed function versus the sort of wisdom of the governing body to thoughtfully weigh the pros and cons of every decision that we make.
I think, Lindsay?
It's really interesting hearing what your take on all of this, and I agree wholeheartedly with this idea of trying to set these parameters. I feel like it could really backfire because data is a living thing. It's not like, here's your data, that's it. Like if you continue to collect data, one data point could change the outcome. For example, the cost of busing. If suddenly gas is $5 a gallon, how is busing going to, the transportation could totally throw everything out of whack. Or if, suddenly COVID intensifies and we lose 10% of our population or something like that. There are things that you just can't, we didn't see COVID coming. So I like the idea of having a lot, the data and looking at it in different ways. But, one of the things the Ripton principal said today is, we're down from 4 to 3 teachers. And I'm thinking, geez, the principal at Mary Colgan is supervising how many teachers versus the teacher at Ripton is supervising how many teachers. What would it be like if, Mrs. Kravitz was supervising 3 teachers and for every 3 teachers, there was another principal? And it just, so should one of the parameters be that every principal should be supervising a minimum of 10 teachers? I think it would be crazy to start to arbitrarily think like that because it doesn't take into account so many things. It's like she's not just supervising 3 teachers, she's supervising a school community. It's not just 3 teachers, it's not just 40 students, it's like the whole community. And, at Mary Hogan, there are all these other support staff positions that are supporting what she's doing that don't exist. And so it's just, I think, Mary Heather, you said something about like the complexity of it. It is so complex, you know, I feel like every time we talk about this, I learn another layer that if I hadn't known about that, I might have decided differently. So it just to oversimplify it, I think it could, even with the small schools who might want to do this, it could really backfire where we say, okay, you know, this is the parameter, you have to have under $20,000 per pupil. And we end up with 3 schools who are at 22 because bus costs went up, or, you know, the school counselors union demanded a 10% increase in salaries or something, or the, you know, school-based, you know, the paraprofessionals union we try to go up in that. I don't know, it's just so complicated. You know, even on the policy level, this is a living decision. This isn't something that we can decide. So I look at this and I think, you know, there's a question about, do we change the charter? Are we considering revising the charter and putting it out to all the voters to look at how many of those people will actually look at it once a lot of people will just vote with their gut or not even show up? Or are we looking at adding a whole set of policies that we're going to start working on? And, you know, our job is to serve the students, and we, as a volunteer governing body, like, we only have a limited amount of time. So I'm a little bit concerned that this is going to derail some of the things that we're doing already. That, you know, I had a note that tonight we were going to do something with the facilities master plan. We don't have time for that. The communications and engagement, we don't have time for that. The budget, we don't have time for that. So it's like, you know, we're biting off a lot, and you know, I think it's good we're at least taking this seriously, but you know, I think we also need to think about how many resources will be devoted to a potential charter change and adding this to the vote, and who might benefit from that. You know, I think Ripton students need to be educated well, but are these resources going to derail the benefit for the other hundreds of students in the district that we're trying to govern? I don't know.
So I think, you know, we're not going to take action tonight, but I want to reiterate and see if I'm summarizing what I'm hearing, and then we'll go from there. Is it safe to say that there are things that the Ripton School Board is requesting that at the macro level, we do agree that there needs to be clear articulation when the time comes why we are closing the school? Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. And since we haven't identified a school to close, that articulation has yet to occur because there has not been a school identified to be closed that this board has considered, to be clear. And so I think we can say then that, yes, we do agree that at the time where we are considering closing the school, there needs to be an argument made and clear articulation as to why. And that would be required of a supermajority to vote on. And I think we're not going out on a lim to say that such articulation would be required to get a supermajority to do anything. And so am I hearing that we do not believe that charter change is required for that?
So what would be good is if you look at Article 14, which is the provision for closure of school. I pulled up the charter, because that it basically states that part of the documentation, part of the review would be coming up with the criteria at the time by which schools will be compared, right? Because it's going to be a hard decision.
I agree, but I'm trying to get to a point where we as a board, does the majority of this board feel as if there needs to be a charter change for articulation of why we would close a school? Where am I at? No, I'm seeing shading of heads.
No.
I mean, it's already in there. It says stating the reason for the closure. It's not detailed, but it's in there.
Okay.
The piece that's missing, having lived through this with others.
We all have,
I know. I know, having lived through this with others, such as the board and the community, is at the time that we're bringing all this data together, there isn't something up front that basically says, okay, this is how we're going to be using this data. This is, so it's just like more data, ton more data, ton more data, but there was never a plan that was shared that brought all that data together.
We were working on the plan.
But what are the things, what are the elements that we need to be looking at? Maybe we missed one, right?
That's what the whole process is, the process, like.
But I mean, I've run businesses, I've done, where you outline, okay, these are the different areas that we're gonna gather data of, and this is how we're gonna look at that data, then you go gather the data.
And that happened for a year.
We did that even by the,
steering
what we
committee.
looked at is what would be the perfect school.
But as a community member, you didn't see that. So maybe everybody here had that, but it wasn't documented.
It was documented. Okay, all right, I'm gonna bring this back then. I don't feel as if, again, we're not gonna rehash the facilities master plan process, but I wanna make sure that at least as a board, we're saying we're in agreement that there must be articulation and that articulation will happen during the process of this, not by a charter change. Okay, great. The next thing I wanna ask is.
Please, that's my minute.
No, we're not going back. I said for clarifying questions. That's what we agreed to, Steve, really.
And then you pointed to me and said, wait a minute.
No, I just said, no, I put my hand up, I believe. So I'm asking, we're trying to get through this and we agreed to just clarifying questions. So at the next point, is with regards to closing a school requiring vote of the town. Are we going to change the charter for that? We need clarity on that. Are we going to require that in our charter, we change it so that if a school does become selected to be closed based upon this identified criteria, will the charter need to be changed to say that that town must vote to do so before that school can be closed? And I want to get a sense from folks on the Zoom call. Where are you? What are your thoughts there? I'm seeing head shaking, but I on something like this, folks, I just need to hear it articulated. Suzanne, Lorraine, Amy, Betty. Oh, great, Lorraine.
Okay, I was on the original committee that created the charter, and there was a lot of discussion about how a school would be closed. And I mean, I strenuously voted or supported not having it be the town making that decision, because it's a very emotional decision. And I would say most, if not all towns, and I won't say all, but I would say most towns are not going to say, yes, we want our school closed for whatever reason, because it's their school. They have an emotional attachment. And that is why we did a super majority. And I was actually did not really want to have this amount of people have to have the school closure. But as we talked about it, I thought, you know what, that makes sense. We are not going to allow the town to make that decision, because it should be the school board's decision as what's best for the whole district and all of the kids. But by having a supermajority, at the time, a lot of people were worried, as we talked about the composition of how many board members, the fact that there were 7 Middlebury people and 6 from the small towns, that, Middlebury would be able to make the determination of what school got closed, or, so by doing the supermajority, it gave that there was going to have to be really compelling reasons to close a school, and that, you're going to have a supermajority on board. And so the people weren't just going to arbitrarily close a school, because again, you have to have really good reasons why in order to get that many board members. So I didn't believe that we should allow it then. And I don't believe that the town should make the decision now. It should be a board decision.
Anybody disagree with that? Barb, do you disagree with that?
I do, and the reason I do is that many of the rural towns have actually, at town meeting day last year, put it on there as a information only provision, right, article, what their view was, and in most of the rural towns, they voted totally that they would like to have that vote. And I think it really is a symptom of a bigger problem. Our rural communities definitely feel like their voice doesn't matter right now. And we really do need to fix that. And, I'm here because people voted for me. And so I think we have to look at the community as well when we're making our decisions and what their desires are and the changes they might want to see.
Any other individual believes?
Amy.
Pardon? Amy.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sympathetic to the issue that you raised, Barb, around and I in my community about having voice, about finding ways to have more voice, about feeling there's a disconnect between our process and conversations at the local level. I do, and here we are embarking and really excited about a strategic plan for equity. If we are hamstrung so that we can't make decisions that are about creating equity in our district for all kids, then we're in the wrong business. And then we're not doing our jobs. So I think that there's a conversation that we can engage in, but I do want to ask the Ripton board, and this is a hypothetical at the moment, but this is a negotiation question, which is, are we insisting that everything be a charter change? Like, where is there room for conversation about things that could be in policy, or where we agree to a particular conversation that will happen at a particular time, or the process? I like the idea of the advisory groups as one way to build that connection between community and town, but to put into code something that's against our mission, it just seems wrong. So
as a clarifying question, Steve, are all of these requirements from your perspective must be charter changes?
No, all of these do not have to be charter changes. Some of them could be policy changes, and I think there could be a mix of both that could potentially work for both sides.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. Yes, Peter.
On this issue, I guess, I go back to the original charter and the frankly overwhelming vote that it passed with as a much clearer indication of people's comfortableness with this. But I would also just point out that we've been on the facilities master plan journey for years. And I think and we still haven't said we're closing any schools. And I think that speaks to, a process that is hard, that I think is well protected with community input, and that thus far has, I don't know if some people would disagree whether it's worked or not worked, but whatever, it is one that has to date not yielded the need to even try to come up with a supermajority. So I think, that basically history is showing that it is a slow, deliberative process that takes into account many different perspectives.
And I would like to add to that comment, the narrative that I have been a part of over the past couple of years in doing this around the rural communities, like the one I live in, feeling disenfranchised or being left behind. That was not the story that I heard from principals today, from those same schools. Those were schools that clearly have a community and have a district that has demonstrated commitment to providing resources and support regardless of the number of kids in those schools. And so I struggle to find that narrative that this is a district that is looking to not support smaller schools, because that was just a bunch of people who got up and said the exact opposite. And so I don't want us to lose sight of that. That was amazing, that hour of what they said they're accomplishing. And this is a district that is trying to find a way so that everybody can experience that. That means that there might have to be sacrifice, and collectively we will have to bear it. But this narrative that we're not caring about our small schools, I just don't see it. Just don't see it. Yes, Lindsay.
About the towns having a voice when it comes to closing schools. The articles, the overwhelming vote in the affirmative, my recollection is there was a lot of discussion about the financial benefits and the equity that would result in consolidation. I also heard the thread of this isn't about closing schools. This is about, equity and, distribution of resources. And I guess the one thing I would say is that, I don't know, bait and switch. There are some people who have articulated just anecdotally, research or anything that was downplayed and even stated that this isn't about closing schools. However, if we were to revise the charter and put it to the voters, I don't know how many people actually really read it. I didn't. I just voted because I thought it sounded like a good idea based on what I read in the Addison Independent. If the real issue is whether these small towns vote individually or not, given the numbers that came out to say we do want to consolidate, I just wonder if, I guess there could be a big, PR thing saying this is us getting our, our voice back. But did that many people miss that the first time around? Did thousands and thousands of voters miss the fact that they were saying, we're going to trust you. We're going to vote on representatives and we're going to trust you, the school board, to make this decision in the supermajority. I think that it's an interesting concept. Like, if I don't live in a small town, but I don't like the idea of giving up my vote, but they gave the vote to a representative that they're voting for, then there's the whole at-large thing. And I just think voters didn't realize what they were voting on. So it's almost becomes a different issue to me that, how much energy do you put into the public dissemination of the details of something like this? We could put all this energy into it, and are people actually going to read, oh, this is the same except for now, instead of being at large? Like, a lot of people don't even realize what at large means, so it's, with the number one there, about the towns voting on the schools, I agree that would a town vote no? We don't want a school anymore. We don't really want to deal with that anymore. We'd rather just have that building sit empty. Let's just, I don't know. It becomes sort of abstract. And we have to, thousands of people would need to change their mind on this to be able to change the charter.
So let's do this. To move things forward, I do believe that we're hearing that a charter change is not something that this board believes is necessary, but that we do agree that there are things in practice, and whether they be policy or understanding, that is of value in this document that we need to ensure moving forward, we find ways to reflect this, i.e. making sure and having clarity around when we do get to the point as a board of needing to close a school, and maybe we don't, maybe we do, but there needs to be articulation as to why that's We don't believe that we need to change the charter to have individual towns vote for that. However, this idea of increasing community involvement in any approaches, I think the Community Engagement Committee, as well as the work of the Equity Committee, is saying, yes, we want more community involvement. I think we completely agree on that. Having that written into a charter, I don't see as necessary that is a practice. But I do think that there will be ways that we're finding ways to increase community involvement. And we need to articulate those to make sure that everyone is comfortable with that moving forward. Whether or not it's a local advisory group or the form and function that takes, I hope the Ripton School Board understands that we want to work towards identifying what that looks like. I don't think tonight we're going to be able to agree that it's going to be called a local advisory board and this is how it's going to feel. But I do think we are in agreement as a board and are trying to work towards getting more community involved in this process. The changes to voting, you know, I have to say, to Chip's point, I'm not quite sure I understand this one. I mean, we're put up who you want to put up, nominate, step up, folks. Like, really, you want to sit here, step up. But having that be required, we are a representative of this district. To all of a sudden change that and go back to limiting that voice to specific towns seems the antithesis of what we were trying to do with the unified school district. So I don't see appetite for that right now. But there is definitely appetite for finding ways to articulate purpose with regards to why schools are closing, and absolutely appetite for clear articulation of how we're going to get community involved in this process moving forward. And maybe that's on us to do a better job of showing that, because I know a lot of that's happening now. Are there any final comments or questions, Mary?
I have a question. You sent us samples from one school district.
Yes.
Are there others?
Yes, so in fact, like especially on the school closure one, there, I believe it is 9 out of 10 entities around the school, around the state have language regarding school closure and accountability in their charter. So there is a plethora of other options out there.
Is that in this document?
No.
We can send you all of them. 9 out of 10 consolidated districts have that in their articles of agreement.
Yeah.
We asked the state to show us examples of successful groups that were doing a really successful job of negotiating a really diverse community size, and they pointed at all of the ones who have that in their articles.
Yeah, and that Windsor Central, that's Reading, Barnard, Killington, Palmford, Woodstock, and then Conic, Green Regional, Danby, Manchester, Sunderland, Dorset, and Londonderry.
Great. So I would like to offer the opportunity, Steve, if you have any final comments that you'd like to make.
Yeah, I would love to. There's a couple things that I'd like to circle back to. First, the Ripton principal right now, as far as supervising 3 individuals, she is actually a math teacher as well at Shoreham. I'm not exactly sure on her FTE, but she is like a 0.3 principal.
So 0.6.
0.6. All right. So she covers some other areas rather than supervising 3 people. So I just wanted to clarify that. 2, I'm not really sure where we got to a place that Ripton was not identified for closure, but it was. The board, I will agree with you, the board never voted on it. But I'm pretty sure if we look far enough in the minutes or something like that, Ripton was identified for closure. So I just want to set the record straight on that. Third, so there was discussion earlier about the board being informed and some amount of the knowledge of why a school would be closed would be embedded in the vote that this board made if you decided to close the school. I agree. That is true. Those metrics would be built into that vote. So there would be an understanding of why that school is being closed. I think I am standing here, representing Ripton in part because the metrics to close a school was not shared with the community. So there was a goal. This board has the power to close the school. It's the community's desire to understand why you are closing a school. So, yes, if you want that power and the knowledge, I'm just going to encourage all of you the value of making sure the community understands that thoroughly, so that you don't perhaps end up in a situation like this again. That's all I have to say.
Great, thank you all very much. So I think what we're gonna try to do is for next board meeting, just have a summary of kind of where we've come out on this, and so that we can all agree to that summary, and that would then be what we would report back to the State Board of Education, if that makes sense.
Mary, when is that, reporting back to the state board?
Peter, when is that reporting back to the board? It's in January, right? January, February.
January 15th, I think it's the second Wednesday there.
So we don't have, that's why we had to get through this, like, there's timelines on this that we need to be working towards. So I appreciate everyone's time, perspective, and consideration as we work through this tonight. Okay, next on the agenda is, I lost my,
We covered our last one, so I think we're.
right, we are in are we in executive session?
Yeah, I'd like a quick executive session before we.
Perfect, thank you all very much.
Like 5 minute break.
Yes, we're gonna take a little stretch break while everybody.
Recording stopped.